Get out by Tuesday, Dad, or the men in white coats are coming to drag you away. My son, the esteemed veterinarian, screamed this in my face while his wife checked her watch as if my life was just another appointment she needed to wrap up. They wanted my $3 million Malibu home. They wanted me gone. I looked at them and smiled a smile they mistook for senility and quietly prepared to hand them exactly what they deserved. A $3 million donation receipt in their name and a prison sentence. Before I tell you how I destroyed their lives without raising my voice, let me know in the comments where you are listening from. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to teach an ungrateful child a lesson they will never forget. My name is Otis King. I am 68 years old. I'm a retired structural engineer who spent 40 years building bridges that can withstand hurricanes and skyscrapers that can survive earthquakes. I know everything there is to know about stress points, load-bearing walls, and the exact moment a foundation is about to crack. But apparently, all that knowledge did not help me build a son with a backbone. The ocean breeze usually brings peace to my living room high above the Pacific Coast Highway, but on this particular Tuesday morning, the air was thick with the stench of expensive perfume and cheap greed. Tuesday. That was the deadline. The word hung in the air like toxic smoke. Darius, my only son, was standing over me, his face twisted into a mask of desperate rage I barely recognized. He was 38 years old, wearing a designer suit that I knew he could not afford, and sweating through the silk lining. Beside him stood Courtney, his wife of 5 years. She was a brand consultant, whatever that meant, though in my experience it mostly involved telling people things they already knew using words they did not understand. She was leaning against the doorframe of my living room, scrolling on her phone, looking at my home not as a place where memories lived, but as a real estate listing she was eager to cash out. "You have to leave, Dad," Darius shouted again, slamming a thick manila folder onto the glass coffee table. The glass rattled just like his nerves. "We have been patient. We have been kind, but we cannot let you live like this anymore. It is unsafe. It is irresponsible. You have until Tuesday to vacate the premises voluntarily, or we execute the medical power of attorney. The van from Gentle Horizons is already on standby." Gentle Horizons. I knew the place. It was a warehouse for the forgotten elderly in the middle of the Nevada desert, a place where people went to stare at beige walls until they expired. It was the cheapest facility in 3 states. I sat deep in my leather armchair, the one Etta, my late wife, had bought me for my retirement. I looked at my son. I looked at the boy I had taught to fish off this very pier. The boy I had put through 8 years of veterinary school. The boy whose student loans I had quietly paid off so he could start his life debt-free. And now he was threatening to lock me away. Courtney finally looked up from her phone. Her eyes scanned the room, lingering on the floor-to-ceiling windows that framed the endless blue of the ocean. She did not see the beauty. She saw the dollar signs. "Honestly, Otis," she said, her voice dripping with that condescending sweetness she reserved for toddlers and service staff. "It is embarrassing. Look at this place. It is a $3 million asset sitting on a cliff, and you are filling it with dust and old junk. You drive a rusted 1998 Ford pickup truck that lowers the property value of the entire neighborhood just by being parked in the driveway. You wear flannel shirts with holes in the elbows. You look like a gardener squatting in a billionaire's house. It is not a good look for the brand. The brand. Everything was about the brand with her. She looked at me as if I were a stain on her perfect life. I did not speak immediately. In my line of work, you learn to listen to the creaking of the metal before the bolt snaps. I was listening now. Why the rush? Why Tuesday? Why the sudden aggression? Darius had always been weak, easily led, but he had never been cruel. This was desperation. I could smell it on him, sour and sharp, cutting through his cologne. I decided to give them what they wanted. Not the house, but the performance. If they saw me as a feeble, teetering old man, then I would be the most feeble, teetering old man they had ever seen. I tried to reach for my coffee mug on the side table. I let my hand tremble. It is a specific rhythm, a shake that starts in the wrist and travels to the fingers. I learned how to mimic it by watching the guys who ran jackhammers for 30 years. My fingers brushed the ceramic handle and I deliberately let my grip fail. The mug tipped. Hot black coffee splashed across the table and dripped onto the Persian rug. "Oh, for God's sake," Courtney hissed, jumping back as if the coffee were acid. "Look at him, Darius. Look at this mess. He cannot even hold a cup without causing a disaster. And you think he can live here alone? You think he can manage his own finances? He is a liability. Darius, a liability. Darius looked at the spill, then at me. For a second, just a split second, I saw a flash of shame in his eyes. He was remembering the father who used to carry him on his shoulders, the father who built this house with his own hands and a team of contractors he managed like a general. But then he looked at Courtney and the shame was replaced by fear. He was terrified of her, or maybe he was terrified of losing her. "I'm sorry," I mumbled, making my voice crack. I lowered my head, staring at my hands. I felt a little dizzy. I thought Etta was bringing me a towel. That was the cherry on top. Etta had been dead for 4 years. Invoking her name as if she were still alive was a calculated move. "He is hallucinating now," Courtney said, rolling her eyes. She did not even move to help clean up the mess. She just stepped over the puddle of coffee to grab her purse. "Did you hear that, Darius? He thinks your mother is in the kitchen. This is textbook dementia. We don't even need to wait for Tuesday. We should call the facility now." "No," Darius said, holding up a hand. He looked at me and I saw him calculating. He needed me to sign something. He couldn't just drag me out without a signature, not if he wanted it to be clean, not if he wanted to sell the house quickly. "Dad, listen to me," Darius said, crouching down so he was at my eye level. He used his soothing vet voice, the one he used on scared golden retrievers before he put them under. "We are doing this because we love you. We want you to be safe. Etta isn't here, Dad. Etta is gone. You are confused. You need professional help. Just sign the papers in the folder and we can make this transition smooth. We can handle everything. The house, the bills, the burden. You won't have to worry about a thing." I looked at the folder. The label on the edge read, "Medical and Financial Power of Attorney. Priority." "I am tired, Darius," I whispered, leaning back and closing my eyes. "I just need to rest. My head is foggy. Can we talk tomorrow?" Courtney huffed, tapping her manicured nails against the doorframe. "We do not have time for this, Darius. The investors need the confirmation by Wednesday or the deal falls through." Darius shot her a look of pure panic. "Shut up, Courtney," he hissed through his teeth. I kept my eyes closed, but my ears were wide open. Investors, deal. Wednesday. The puzzle pieces were clicking into place. They weren't just worried about my health. They had already spent the money from selling my house. They were in debt and they were in deep. "Let him sleep," Darius whispered to her. "He is weak. He is breaking down. Look at him. He spilled coffee on himself. He thinks Mom is alive. By tomorrow morning he will be so confused he will sign anything just to make it stop. We leave the papers here. We come back tomorrow at 8. If he hasn't signed, we bring the doctor." "Which doctor?" Courtney asked. "Dr. Evans," Darius replied. "He owes me a favor. He will certify whatever we need him to certify." They moved toward the door. I heard the jingle of car keys. "Goodbye, Dad." Darius called out, his voice fake and hollow. "Get some rest. We love you. You better not ruin the rug any more than you already have," Old Man Courtney muttered under her breath as she walked out. I waited. I counted the seconds. 1, 2, 3. I heard the heavy front door slam shut. I heard the electronic lock engage. I heard the engine of Darius's leased Range Rover roar to life, a car that cost more than my first house. I listened as the tires crunched over the gravel driveway, fading into the distance down the winding canyon road. Silence returned to the house on the cliff. I opened my eyes. I sat up straight. The trembling in my hands vanished instantly. I reached for a napkin from the side table and calmly wiped the coffee from the glass. They thought I was a relic. They thought I was a confused old engineer whose mind was rusting away like the bumper of my truck. They saw the flannel shirt and the old car and assumed I was simple. They forgot that I was the man who designed the foundation this house stood on. They forgot that before I retired, I managed multi-million-dollar projects where contractors would try to cheat me out of every dime, and I caught them every single time. I stood up and walked to the window. The sun was beginning to set over the ocean, painting the sky in shades of violent orange and bruised purple. I looked at the reflection of myself in the glass. Gray hair-lined face, yes, but the eyes were sharp. The eyes were clear. I walked back to the table and picked up the folder Darius had left. I opened it. It was worse than I thought. It wasn't just a power of attorney. It was a petition for an emergency conservatorship. It claimed I was a danger to myself. It claimed I was squandering my assets. It claimed I had the mental capacity of a child. They didn't just want the house, they wanted to erase me. They wanted to strip me of my rights, my dignity, and my name just so they could cover whatever financial hole they had dug themselves into. I felt a coldness settle in my chest. It wasn't sadness. Sadness is for when you lose something you love. I wasn't losing my son. I was realizing I had lost him a long time ago. This was a structural failure. When a beam is rotten, you don't paint over it. You cut it out before it brings the whole building down. I walked to the large mahogany bookshelf that covered the east wall. To the casual observer, it was just rows of old engineering textbooks and encyclopedias. I pulled on the spine of Advanced Structural Analysis, Volume 3. The mechanism clicked and a small section of the shelf popped open. Inside was my safe. I spun the dial left, right, left. The heavy steel door swung open. Inside were the deeds to the house, my passport, stacks of cash I kept for emergencies, and a small black burner phone I hadn't used in 5 years. I took the phone out and powered it on. The battery still held a charge. I scrolled through the contacts until I found the name I needed. Harrison Cole. Harrison wasn't just a lawyer. He was a shark in a 3-piece suit, a man I had served with in the Army Corps of Engineers 40 years ago before he decided he liked fighting in courtrooms better than in jungles. He was the only man in Los Angeles I trusted. I pressed call. It rang twice. Otis Harrison's voice was gravelly and surprised. I haven't seen this number pop up since the '98 riots. Is the big one finally hitting California worse? I said, my voice steady and cold. It is a demolition job, Harrison. And the wrecking ball is my son. Tell me, Harrison said. The joking tone was gone. They served me a verbal eviction notice today. They are coming back tomorrow with a corrupt doctor to sign a conservatorship order. They want the house, Harrison. They want it all. I heard the sound of a pen scratching on paper on the other end of the line. Do they know about the trust? Harrison asked. No, I said. They think I am just a retired engineer with a pension and a nice house. They don't know about the patents. They don't know about the consulting shares. They don't know about the liquid assets. Good, Harrison said. Keep it that way. What do you want to do, Otis? Do you want to fight the conservatorship? We can tie them up in court for years. No, I said. I looked out at the ocean, watching the waves crash against the rocks below. I don't want to defend Harrison. I want to attack. I want to find out why they are desperate enough to do this. I want to know who they owe money to, and then I want to pull the rug out from under them so hard they never stand up again. I understand, Harrison said. I will put the investigators on it tonight. We will look into Darius's practice. We will look into Courtney's consulting firm. If they are bleeding cash, we will find the wound. Do it, I said. And Harrison, yeah. Otis, start drafting the paperwork for the donation. You are sure? I looked at the coffee stain on the rug. I looked at the spot where my son had stood and lied to my face. I am sure. Initiate protocol, Etta. Understood. I will see you at the office in the morning. Watch your back, Otis. Desperate people do desperate things. I hung up the phone and placed it back in the safe. I closed the bookshelf. The room was dark now, only illuminated by the moonlight reflecting off the water. They wanted a senile old man. I would give them one. But tomorrow I wasn't going to be sitting here waiting for their corrupt doctor. Tomorrow I was going on a little field trip. My son was a veterinarian. He ran King's Pet Care, a clinic I had designed and built for him 10 years ago. It was a state-of-the-art facility. I knew every vent, every drain, and every electrical conduit in that building. If Darius was in trouble, the answers wouldn't be in my living room. They would be in his office, and it was time for the janitor to pay a visit. I went to my bedroom closet and pushed aside the suits I hadn't worn in years. In the back, I found it. My old gray coveralls stained with grease and paint from years of hobby work. I found my tool belt. I found my heavy work boots. I stripped off the flannel shirt and the comfortable slacks. I pulled on the coveralls. They still fit, though a little looser around the waist than they used to be. I looked in the mirror. I didn't look like a multimillionaire. I didn't look like a victim. I looked like a man who fixed broken things. Tomorrow, I was going to fix this family by destroying it. The fog was still clinging to the coast highway when I pulled my 1998 Ford pickup into the service alley behind King's Pet Care. The engine rattled and coughed before dying into silence. It was a sound I usually loved, a reminder of things that were built to last. But today it just sounded tired. I sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel. My knuckles were dark and scarred from 40 years of handling rebar and concrete. I looked up at the building. It was a sleek modern structure with floor-to-ceiling glass and brushed steel accents. I knew exactly how much steel was in those beams because I was the one who calculated the load. I knew exactly where the plumbing lines ran because I was the one who drew the blueprints. I had built this place for Darius. It was supposed to be his legacy. Now it was a crime scene. I reached over to the passenger seat and picked up my old red toolbox. It was heavy, scratched, and smelled of oil and metal. I grabbed a battered baseball cap and pulled it low over my eyes. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. I did not look like the owner of a $3 million estate. I did not look like a retired engineer who had commanded crews of 200 men. I looked like exactly what they thought I was. A nobody. A relic. An invisible old man who fixed things that other people broke. I stepped out of the truck and walked to the rear service door. Most people see a locked door and see a barrier. I saw a keypad I had installed myself. I punched in the master override code. It was my birthday. Darius had never bothered to change it. The lock clicked and the heavy door swung open with a silent, well-oiled sigh. I was inside. The clinic smelled of antiseptic and lemon cleaner, a sharp chemical scent that tried to cover up the underlying smell of fear and sickness. It was early, but the staff was already moving around in the front. I could hear the click of typing and the low murmur of phones ringing. I kept my head down and walked with purpose. That is the secret to being invisible. If you walk like you have a job to do and you carry a toolbox, nobody looks at you twice. To the young receptionists and the veterinary technicians, I was just part of the background infrastructure like the water heater or the air conditioning unit. I made my way to the utility closet that shared a wall with the main office. Darius loved his corner office. He liked the view of the ocean. He liked the mahogany desk I had paid for, but he forgot that I designed the ventilation system. The main air return vent for the entire east wing ran directly above his desk and passed right through the ceiling of the utility closet. It was an acoustic tunnel. If you stood on a ladder in that closet, you could hear a pin drop in the office next door. I set up my ladder and climbed up. I removed the vent cover with my drill, moving slowly to avoid any noise. I pushed aside the filter. The voices drifted down clear and sharp. Darius was not alone. Or rather, he was not talking to himself. He was on the phone, and he sounded like a man who was drowning. "Please listen to me. I need more time." The voice was high-pitched, tight with panic. It was my son, but it was not the voice of the doctor who charmed pet owners. It was the voice of a scared child. I pressed my ear closer to the metal duct. "No, I do not have the 50,000 today." Darius paused, listening to the person on the other line. I could not hear the other voice, but I could imagine the threat. Darius slammed his hand on the desk. "It wasn't my fault. Courtney said the crypto market was going to rebound. She said it was a sure thing. We leveraged everything. Crypto, of course. My daughter-in-law, the brand consultant, had gambled their future on digital coins that did not exist, and my son had followed her off the cliff. But what I heard next turned my blood to ice. I am getting the product, I promise. I have a new shipment coming in this afternoon. Yes, the ketamine. It is high grade. Veterinary strength. I can move it. I just need a few days to cook the books, so the inventory matches." I froze on the ladder. The toolbox felt heavy in my hand. Ketamine. My son was not just broke. He was not just in debt. He was trafficking narcotics. He was stealing controlled substances from his own clinic, substances meant to ease the pain of suffering animals, and selling them to dealers to cover his bad investments. This was a federal crime. This was prison. This was the end of his license, the end of his career, and the end of the family name I had spent a lifetime building. I heard Darius pacing the floor. His footsteps were heavy and erratic. "I am liquidating an asset," he said into the phone. "My father's house. It is prime Malibu real estate. $3 million easy. I am taking control of it this week. Once I sell it, I will pay you everything. Principal and interest. Just do not hurt her. Please do not hurt Courtney." I climbed down the ladder slowly. My knees were shaking, but not from age. They were shaking from rage. He was selling my home, my sanctuary, the place where his mother died, to pay off a drug debt, and he was doing it to protect the woman who had led him into this mess. I needed proof. Hearing it was one thing. Proving it to a medical board or a judge was another. I needed to get into that office. I waited. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Finally, I heard the door to his office open and close. I heard his footsteps walking down the hallway towards the front reception. He was probably going to put on his white coat and smile at customers, pretending he wasn't a criminal. I grabbed my pipe wrench, not because I needed it, but because it was a good prop. I walked out of the utility closet and headed straight for his office door. It was locked. I pulled a thin piece of tension steel from my pocket. Another trick from my engineering days. The lock was a simple pin tumbler. It took me 6 seconds. I slipped inside and closed the door behind me. The office was a mess. Papers were scattered everywhere. Takeout containers covered the sidebar. It smelled of stale coffee and sweat. On the wall hung the diploma I had framed for him. It looked crooked. I went straight to the desk. I didn't hack his computer. I didn't need to. Careless men make careless mistakes. There was a physical ledger open on the desk next to the keyboard. It was a black notebook. I flipped it open. It was a second set of books. On the left side were the legitimate patient names. Mrs. Higgins' cat. Mr. Jacobs' golden retriever. On the right side were the real numbers. Dosage amounts that didn't make sense. Inventory counts that were wildly inflated. He was logging surgeries that never happened to account for the bottles of anesthesia he was taking out the back door. I pulled out my phone and started snapping pictures. Page after page. Dates. Amounts. Patient names used as cover. It was a roadmap of his crimes. Then I saw something else. In the trash can next to the desk there was a crumbled piece of paper. I smoothed it out. It was a threatening note handwritten. Tuesday. Or we take a finger. That explained the deadline. That explained why he was screaming at me yesterday. He wasn't worried about my health. He was worried about his own fingers. I heard footsteps approaching the door. Heavy footsteps. I didn't panic. I am an engineer. I solve problems. I dropped the note back in the trash. I closed the ledger. I dropped to my knees and opened the cabinet under the sink in the corner of the room. I jammed my head and shoulders inside, engaging the pipe wrench on the P-trap. The door opened. Who was in here? It was Darius. I pulled my head out slowly, adjusting my cap. Just the plumber, Doc. Front desk said you had a leak in here. Thought I would check the fittings while you were out. Darius stared at me. For a second, I thought he recognized me. He looked at my face, then at my hands, then at the coveralls. But he didn't see his father. He saw a servant. He saw a fixture. We didn't call a plumber, he snapped. Get out. I have work to do. Just doing my job, boss, I said, keeping my voice low and gravelly. I stood up, gathering my tools. I wiped my hands on my pants. I walked past him. I was close enough to smell the fear on him. He smelled like a man who hadn't showered in 2 days. I walked out of the office and didn't look back. I walked down the hallway, past the kennels, past the grooming station, and out the back door. I got into my truck and locked the doors. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a jackhammer. I sat there for a long time, just breathing. I had the evidence. I had the pictures of the ledger. I knew about the drugs. I knew about the debt. I could drive to the police station right now. I could hand this over to the DEA. Darius would be in handcuffs by lunchtime. But as I put the key in the ignition, I hesitated. If I arrested him now, he would go to prison, yes. But Courtney would spin it. She would play the victim. She would say she didn't know. She would divorce him, take whatever assets were left, and move on to the next mark. And Darius would just be a tragedy, a good man who fell from grace. No, that wasn't enough. I didn't just want to stop him. I wanted to expose them. I wanted to tear down the false facade they had built. I wanted the world to see the rot underneath the expensive suits and the brand consulting. I thought about the medical board gala on Saturday. Darius was up for an award, Veterinarian of the Year. He had bragged about it for months. I looked at the phone in my hand. I looked at the pictures of the stolen drugs. I put the truck in gear. I wasn't going to the police. Not yet. I was going to let them think they were winning. I was going to let them think the old man was broken and senile and ready to sign everything away. I was going to give them enough rope to hang themselves, and then I was going to kick the chair out from under them in front of the entire city. I drove out of the alley. I had a lot of work to do before Tuesday. And the next stop was home, because if Courtney was already selling my things, I needed to know exactly what she was pricing my memories at. The game had changed. They were playing for money. I was playing for souls. And I had the advantage because they didn't know the engineer had entered the building. The drive back from the clinic to my house usually takes 20 minutes along the coast. But today it felt like driving through a tunnel of fire. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. I had the evidence of Darius' crimes in my pocket. I had the pictures of the stolen drugs and the second set of books. I knew my son was a criminal, but I still did not know the full extent of the rot inside my home. I pulled my rusted Ford pickup into the driveway of the estate. The ocean breeze was kicking up, pushing whitecaps against the rocks below the cliff. It should have been peaceful. It was not. There was a white van parked near the garage. It was not a medical transport vehicle. It was not a contractor. The side of the van read Verdant Luxury Plant Logistics. 2 men in green uniforms were hauling crates out of my backyard. I killed the engine and stepped out. I kept my head down and my shoulders slumped, adopting the posture of the defeated old man they thought I was. I walked slowly around the side of the house toward the patio. My wife Etta had loved many things. She loved jazz music. She loved lemon cake. But more than anything, she loved her bonsai trees. She had started cultivating them 40 years ago when we bought this land. There were 12 of them: junipers, pines, maples. She tended to them every morning with tiny shears and infinite patience. She used to say that a bridge takes strength to build, but a bonsai takes a soul to grow. After she died, I watered them every single day at 6 in the morning. They were the last living piece of her I had left, and Courtney was selling them. I stopped behind the thick hedge of bougainvillea that separated the driveway from the garden. I could see them clearly. Courtney was standing by the infinity pool, holding a clipboard and pointing. She was wearing designer yoga pants and oversized sunglasses, looking like she owned the world. "Be careful with that one," she snapped at one of the movers who was lifting a 40-year-old juniper. "That represents a $5,000 down payment on my new life, so do not drop it," the mover grunted. "Lady, these things are heavy. The pots are solid ceramic." "Just load them," Courtney said, waving her hand dismissively. "And make sure the wire transfer hit the account before you leave the driveway." I told the buyer cash or immediate wire only. No checks, no traces. I felt a physical pain in my chest that had nothing to do with my heart. It was the sensation of a structural beam snapping under too much weight. She was not just clearing out clutter. She was liquidating my memories. She was selling Etta. I pulled out my phone again. I stayed hidden in the shadows of the hedge. I pressed record. A man in a sharp blue suit walked up to Courtney. He looked like a collector. He looked like the kind of man who knew the price of everything and the value of nothing. "Mrs. King," he said, smoothing his tie, "the collection is impressive. Truly. Your father-in-law must have been a dedicated master. It is a shame he is losing his faculties." Courtney let out a laugh that sounded like glass breaking. "Oh, it is tragic, really. He thinks they are just weeds. He tried to water them with bleach yesterday. We have to get them out of here before he destroys them completely. It is a mercy, really." I bit my lip so hard I tasted blood. Bleach. I had never heard a living thing in my life. She was painting me as a monster to justify her theft. The man nodded, pulling an envelope from his jacket pocket. "Here is the balance, $20,000 in cash as requested. The rest has been wired to the account number you provided. It is an offshore account, correct?" "Yes," Courtney said, snatching the envelope. "Cayman Islands. My husband does not need to know about this transaction. He gets sentimental about his mother's old junk. I want to surprise him with a vacation once the house is sold." The man smiled a conspiratorial grin. "I understand perfectly. What the husband does not know cannot hurt him." I froze. She wasn't using this money to pay Darius' debt. She wasn't using it to pay off the drug dealers who were threatening to cut off his fingers. She was wiring it to an offshore account that Darius didn't know about. Courtney was not trying to save her marriage. She was packing a parachute. She knew the ship was sinking. She knew Darius was going to crash and burn, and she was stealing everything she could before she jumped out the door. She was going to let him rot in prison or get killed by loan sharks while she sipped cocktails on a beach funded by my dead wife's trees. I had a choice to make. I could step out right now. I could roar like a lion. I could smash that clipboard out of her hand and tell the movers to put my trees back, or I would break their legs. I could save Etta's legacy. But if I did that, I would reveal my hand. Courtney would know I was lucid. She would know I was watching. She would alert Darius, and they would accelerate their plans. They might get desperate enough to physically hurt me before Tuesday. To win the war, I had to lose the battle. I had to let them take the trees. I closed my eyes and whispered a silent apology to Etta. "I am sorry, my love. I have to let them go. But I promise you, I will trade them for justice." I put the phone back in my pocket. I took a deep, trembling breath. I shuffled my feet, creating a noise on the gravel. I stepped out from behind the hedge. "Who are these men?" I called out, making my voice waver and pitch high. "Courtney! Courtney, who are these people in my garden?" Courtney jumped. She shoved the envelope of cash into her oversized purse so fast she almost tore the leather. She spun around, pasting a fake smile on her face. "Oh, Otis," she said, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. "You startled me. I did not know you were back from your walk." I pointed a shaking finger at the movers who were loading the last maple onto the truck. "That is Otis tree. Where are they taking Otis tree?" Courtney walked over to me and placed a hand on my arm. Her grip was tight, painful. She was steering me away from the truck. "Dad, listen to me. We found a fungus, a terrible black mold on all the trees. The gardener said it was toxic. It releases spores that affect the brain. It makes memory loss worse. That is probably why you have been feeling so confused lately." I looked at her. The lie was so smooth, so practiced. She was using my health as a cover for her greed. "Fungus," I repeated, looking confused. "But they look green. They look healthy." "That is how it tricks you," Courtney said, squeezing my arm harder. "It looks healthy, but it is rotten on the inside. Just like this house. We have to get rid of them for your safety. I am paying these men a lot of money to haul them away to the dump." The dump. She was selling them for $60,000 and telling me she was throwing them in the garbage. I looked at the buyer in the blue suit. He looked away, unable to meet my eyes. He knew he was part of a robbery, but he wanted the trees too much to care. "Please," I whispered, letting a tear roll down my cheek. It was a real tear, but not for the reason she thought. "Please leave me one. Just the small one." "We cannot risk it," Otis, Courtney said firmly. She signaled the driver to close the van doors. "It is for your own good. Now why don't you go inside? I think there is some old soup in the fridge if you are hungry. I have work to do." The van engine roared to life. I watched as they drove away, carrying 40 years of my life down the driveway. Courtney waved at the driver, then turned and marched back into the house, clutching her purse tight to her side. She walked with a bounce in her step. She was $60,000 richer. I stood alone in the empty spot where the bonsai bench used to be. The concrete was stained with water circles and a few fallen leaves. I did not go inside to eat old soup. I walked to the edge of the cliff and looked out at the ocean. The rage was cold now. It was a solid block of ice in my stomach. Courtney had made a mistake, a fatal tactical error. She thought she was the smart one. She thought she was the predator. But she had just shown me her throat. She had no loyalty to Darius. That was her weak point. If I applied pressure there, the whole alliance would shatter. My pocket buzzed. I pulled out the burner phone. It was a text message from Harrison Cole, my lawyer. "Otis, we have the intel on the gala. It is confirmed. This Saturday night, the State Veterinary Medical Board is hosting their annual fundraiser at the Ritz-Carlton. Darius is the sole nominee for Veterinarian of the Year based on falsified charity work records he submitted. The governor will be there. The press will be there. It is a black tie event." I stared at the screen. Saturday. That was 4 days away. Tuesday was the eviction deadline. They wanted me out by Tuesday so they could sell the house to pay the debt. But on Saturday, Darius was going to be standing on a stage accepting an award for being a saint. It was perfect. I typed back a reply, my fingers moving steady and sure. "Get me a ticket, and get the deed transfer documents ready. I am going to make a donation." Harrison replied instantly, "You want to do this live? It will be a bloodbath." I looked at the empty space in the garden. I looked at the spot where Etta used to stand and trim her trees, humming to herself. "It won't be a bloodbath, Harrison. It will be a demolition. And I'm going to push the button." I put the phone away. I turned back to the house. Courtney was probably in the kitchen pouring herself a glass of wine to celebrate her heist. Darius would be home soon, terrified and sweating, hoping his wife had solved his problems. They thought the clock was ticking for me. They thought Tuesday was the end of the line. But the real deadline was Saturday. I walked back toward the house. I had to practice my lines. I had to be the confused old man for 3 more days. I had to let them abuse me, let them insult me, let them steal from me. Because every insult was another nail in their coffin, and I was going to hammer them all home on live television. I opened the sliding glass door and stepped into the living room. Courtney was on the couch talking on her phone. She hung up quickly when she saw me. "Did you eat your soup?" she asked without looking up. "I forgot," I mumbled, shuffling toward my bedroom. "I just want to lie down." "Good," she said. "Stay out of the way. Darius is bringing a specialist over later. A doctor. He is going to evaluate you." Try not to embarrass us, okay? I paused at the door to the hallway. A specialist. That would be the corrupt doctor they were paying to sign my life away. Okay, Courtney, I said softly. I will be good. I closed my bedroom door and locked it. I went to the mirror and looked at my face. I practiced the vacant stare. I practiced the slack jaw. Bring on the doctor. Bring on the lawyers. Bring on the whole damn world. The engineer was ready to work, and I was about to condemn this entire building. The sun had dipped below the horizon, leaving the living room in a bath of gray twilight by the time I heard the tires of the Range Rover crunch against the gravel. I was sitting in my recliner, the leather cold against my back, staring at a blank television screen. I had spent the last hour preparing myself, not physically, but mentally. I had to go back in time. I had to go back to 1982. I was 34 years old, then the only black structural engineer on a massive suspension bridge project in the Bay Area. I had a foreman named Miller, a man with a neck as red as a brick and a hatred for me that burned just as hot. Miller used to scream at me in front of the crew, calling me boy, questioning my math, sabotaging my orders. Every instinct I had told me to scream back, to fight, to break his jaw, but I did not. I learned then that the loudest man in the room is usually the weakest. I learned that if you stay silent, if you stare blankly, if you let them think you are slow or scared, they get sloppy. They reveal their cracks. Miller eventually got fired for cutting corners on cement mixture because he thought I was too stupid to notice the invoices he left on his desk. I noticed. I always noticed. Tonight I had to be that man again. I had to be the stone that the river flows around. The front door opened. The air pressure in the house changed. I heard Darius' voice tight and anxious. I heard Courtney's heels clicking on the hardwood like a ticking clock. And I heard a third set of footsteps. Heavy. Shuffling. Here he is, Darius said, walking into the room and flipping on the overhead lights. The sudden brightness made me blink, and I let my mouth hang open slightly. Dad, wake up. We brought a friend to see you. I turned my head slowly, pretending it took effort to focus my eyes. Standing next to my son was a man who looked like he had been poured into a suit 2 sizes too small. He was sweating. He had a stethoscope draped around his neck like a prop from a Halloween costume. I recognized him. His name was Vance. He wasn't a specialist. He was a guy Darius played poker with on Thursday nights. He was a chiropractor who had lost his license for insurance fraud 5 years ago and now ran some shady wellness clinic in a strip mall. This is Dr. Vance, Darius said. He is a specialist in geriatric cognitive decline. He just wants to ask you a few questions, Dad, to make sure you are okay. Vance stepped forward. He smelled of peppermint gum and stale bourbon. He flashed a smile that was all teeth and no warmth. Hello, Mr. King. Darius tells me you have been having some trouble with your memory lately. Is that right? I looked at him. I looked through him. I let my hands start that rhythmic tremor again, the one I had practiced. I turned my gaze to Courtney, who was standing by the window tapping on her phone. Etta, I whispered. My voice was raspy. Etta, is that you? You are late. The roast is going to burn. Courtney let out a sharp sigh of disgust. She did not even look up from her screen. I am not Etta, old man. Etta is dead. I am Courtney, your daughter-in-law. Try to keep up. Darius looked at Vance with a mix of shame and hope. See? I told you. He does not know what year it is. He thinks my wife is my mother. Vance nodded, pulling a pen from his pocket and clicking it repeatedly. It is classic presentation. Disorientation. Hallucination. Confusing the living with the dead. It is advanced, very advanced. I would say he is a danger to himself. He hadn't even checked my pulse. He hadn't asked me the date. He was just reciting the lines they had paid him to say. I decided to push it further. I stood up, shaky on my legs. I patted the pockets of my flannel shirt. Where is it? I mumbled. Where is the book? What book? Dad, Darius asked, stepping closer. The savings book, I said. The blue one. I need to go to the bank. I need to get the money for the... I let the sentence trail off, looking confused. Darius and Courtney froze. Their heads snapped toward me in unison. The greed in the room was sudden and electric. They thought I was talking about a hidden stash. They thought the old fool had forgotten he had money hidden in the walls. What money? Otis Courtney asked, stepping closer, her voice dropping an octave. Where is the book, Otis? Is it in the bedroom? Is it in the safe? I looked at her with wide, watery eyes. I saved it. For the baby. For little Darius. He needs a new bike. Darius' face twisted. He wasn't a baby. He was a 38-year-old drug dealer in debt to the mob, but the mention of money made him sloppy. "It is okay, Dad," he said, his voice trembling with anticipation. "We will find the book. We will keep it safe. But first you need to sign some papers for the doctor, so we can help you find the money." Vance pulled a thick document from his briefcase. It was the conservatorship agreement. It was the legal weapon that would strip me of my rights, my home, and my name. It would give Darius full control over my medical decisions and my assets. "This is just a formality," Mr. King Vance said. "It is a medical release. It just says you trust your son to help you with your appointments." I looked at the paper. The text was dense, but I saw the keywords. Total control. Indefinite term. Immediate effect. I hesitated. I looked around the room as if I were lost. "I don't know," I whispered. "I don't know if I should. Etta said not to sign anything without her," Courtney snapped. She closed the distance between us and grabbed my arm. Her fingernails dug into my skin. "Etta is rotting in the ground, Otis," she hissed. "She is not coming back. You are alone, and if you do not sign this paper tonight, we are going to leave you here. We will leave you here to rot just like her. No food, no help. Do you understand?" Darius looked away, unable to watch his wife threaten his father. But he didn't stop her. That was his sin. Cowardice is a sin. Or Courtney continued, her voice turning smooth and venomous. "Or you sign this and we take you to a nice place. A place with friends. A place where you can rest." I knew the place. I had heard them talking about it. Sunnyvale in Nevada. It was a converted motel on the edge of the desert. They put 4 patients to a room. They fed them gruel. It cost $800 a month. They were going to dump me there and keep the other $2,990,000 for themselves. "A nice place," I repeated, my voice sounding small and hopeful. "With a garden." "Yes, Dad," Darius said, turning back to me. "A big garden. Just sign the paper." I sat back down in the recliner. I let my shoulders slump. I looked at the pen Vance was holding out to me. It was a cheap plastic ballpoint. This was the moment. The beam was under maximum load. It was time to introduce the structural flaw. I am right-handed. I have been right-handed my entire life. I drafted blueprints with my right hand. I threw baseballs with my right hand. I signed Darius' birth certificate with my right hand. Every legal document I had ever executed in 40 years was signed with my right hand. But a senile man is confused. A senile man forgets which hand is dominant. A senile man loses his motor skills. I reached out and took the pen with my left hand. Darius was too busy looking at the deed to the house on the table to notice. Courtney was too busy texting her real estate agent friend to notice. Vance was too busy thinking about the whiskey he was going to buy with his bribe money to notice. I placed the tip of the pen on the signature line. I let my hand shake violently. I dragged the pen across the paper, creating a jagged, illegible scrawl that looked nothing like my signature. It was a mess of loops and lines. And then for the final touch, I misspelled my own middle name. My middle name is James. I wrote James with a J. I dropped the pen. It rolled off the table and onto the floor. There I said, letting out a long, exhaled breath. "I did it, Etta. I did it." Darius snatched the paper up before the ink was even dry. He stared at the signature. He didn't see the wrong hand. He didn't see the misspelling. He just saw a signature. He saw victory. "It is done," he said, looking at Courtney. His eyes were wide and manic. "It is legal. We have control." Courtney let out a laugh of pure triumph. She looked at me with a gaze that could have peeled paint. "Good," she said. "Pack his things, Darius. Just the trash bags. He does not need the suitcases where he is going." "Wait," Vance said, looking at the paper. It is a bit messy. Will the bank accept this?" "It is fine," Darius snapped, putting the paper in his folder. "He is diagnosed with dementia. Of course it is messy. That just proves he needed the help. We have your medical evaluation to back it up, right, Vance?" Vance nodded, sweating. "Right, yes. Severe cognitive decline. He does not know up from down." Darius turned to me. He was smiling, but it was the smile of a predator who has finally caught the rabbit. "You did good, Dad. You did really good. Go to sleep now. We have a big day tomorrow. We have to move you out." Where I asked. "Where are we going?" "To the garden," Courtney said, mocking me. "To the big garden in the desert. Now shut up and sleep." They turned to leave. They were practically vibrating with adrenaline. They had won. They had the $3 million house. They had the power of attorney. They had the old man trapped. They walked out the front door laughing. I heard Vance say something about celebrating. I heard Courtney mention a bottle of champagne. I sat in the chair and listened to the silence return to my house. I looked at my left hand. It was steady. They thought a signature was just ink on paper. They didn't know that a signature under duress with the wrong hand and a misspelled name is not a legal binding contract. It is evidence. It is proof of coercion. It is proof of fraud. Any judge with half a brain would look at that document, compare it to 40 years of my right-handed signatures, and throw it out of court. And then they would look at the man who forced me to sign it. I stood up, I walked to the window and watched their taillights disappear down the coast highway. They were going to celebrate. They were going to toast to their victory. I walked to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water. I drank it standing up, looking at the spot where Courtney had sold Etta S. trees. They wanted to send me to the desert. They wanted to bury me in a cheap room and forget I existed. I washed the glass and put it away. I was not going to the desert. I went back to the safe and took out the phone. I called Harrison. It was late, but I knew he would answer. "We have the document," I said. "I signed it lefty." "Good," Harrison said. "That is the kill switch. Did they bring the doctor?" "Yes." "Vance, the chiropractor." Harrison let out a low whistle. "They are scraping the bottom of the barrel, Otis. That is a felony. Practicing without a license, forgery, fraud. We have them on everything." "Not yet," I said. "Eyes. We have the lock, but we don't have the key. I need the rest of it, Harrison. I need to know where the drugs are going. I need to know who is buying. You are going back to the clinic, aren't you?" "Tonight," I said. "Otis, if they catch you..." "They won't catch me," I said. "They are too busy spending my money in their heads. They think the war is over. They think they captured the general. They don't know the general is already behind enemy lines. Be careful, Otis." I hung up. I went to the garage. I didn't take the truck this time. It was too loud. I took my bicycle. It was old, but I kept the chain oiled. It was silent. I put on my black windbreaker. I put my tools in a backpack. Darius was celebrating. He was probably popping corks and looking at real estate listings for private islands. He wasn't watching the monitors at his clinic. He wasn't watching the inventory. He had made a mistake. He thought the signature was the end of the story. He didn't know it was just the opening chapter of his indictment. I pedaled out into the night. The fog was rolling in again, thick and cold. It was perfect cover. I was going back to the clinic. I was going to find the poison. And I was going to make sure that when the hammer fell, it fell on the right heads. The senile old man was gone. The engineer was back on the job site. And I was about to inspect the foundation of my son's life and find every single crack. The fog rolled in off the Pacific, thick and heavy like a wet wool blanket, smothering the coastline. It was 2 a.m. The world was asleep, but I was wide open. I sat in my rusted Ford truck parked 3 blocks away from King's Pet Care. My hands were steady on the wheel, but my heart was a cold engine revving in my chest. I had the ledger photos. I had the recordings of Courtney selling my memories. I had the misspelled signature on the conservatorship papers. It was enough to defend myself, but it was not enough to destroy them. To destroy them, I needed the nuclear option. I needed to prove not just that Darius was a bad son, but that he was a monster. I pulled my black beanie low over my ears. I zipped up my dark windbreaker. I grabbed my canvas tool bag. I did not look like a 68-year-old retiree. I looked like a shadow. I walked the 3 blocks, keeping to the dark patches between streetlights. The clinic loomed ahead, a modern glass and steel box that I had designed to be a sanctuary for healing. Now it was a factory for greed. The alarm system was a Honeywell Vista series, top of the line 10 years ago. I installed it myself. I knew the wiring diagram better than I knew the back of my own hand. I knew that if you cut the fiber optic line to the main panel, it would trigger a silent alarm to the police station. But I also knew that there was a maintenance bypass circuit installed behind the external junction box on the north wall. It was a fail-safe I built in case of electrical fires. A back door. I knelt by the junction box. I used my specialized screwdriver to remove the faceplate. The wires were color-coded. Red, blue, yellow. I attached a jumper cable from the red terminal to the yellow grounding post. The little green light on the circuit board blinked once, then turned solid orange. System bypassed. I walked to the rear service door and keyed in my code. The lock disengaged with a heavy mechanical clunk. I slipped inside and closed the door softly behind me. The clinic was different at night. The silence was heavy. The air smelled of bleach and something metallic like old blood. The hum of the refrigerators in the pharmacy was the only sound. I went straight to the pharmacy. It was a secure room with a reinforced steel door and a biometric lock. Darius thought this made him safe. He forgot that the biometric scanner was wired into the same power grid as the emergency lighting. I pulled the main breaker for the room. The maglocks disengaged. The door swung open. I turned on my flashlight, keeping the beam low. The shelves were lined with bottles, rows and rows of them. Antibiotics, painkillers, sedatives, and ketamine. Or at least there should have been ketamine. The shelf labeled Anesthetics Schedule 3 was almost empty. There were only 3 bottles left. I moved to the computer terminal in the corner. I booted it up. It asked for a password. I tried Courtney. Incorrect. I tried money. Incorrect. I tried Darius 1. Incorrect. I thought about my son. I thought about what mattered to him. I typed in BMW M3. Access granted. Pathetic. I opened the inventory management software. I started cross-referencing the purchase orders with the patient usage logs. The numbers on the screen were staggering. In the last 6 months, Darius had ordered 500 vials of ketamine. That was enough to anesthetize a zoo, but the usage logs were where the horror truly lived. I saw entry after entry for emergency sedation. Golden retrievers, Labradors, poodles, all healthy breeds, all coming in for routine checkups or grooming, and all leaving with a billing code for acute distress requiring sedation. I clicked on a file for a dog named Buster, a 3-year-old boxer. He came in for a nail trim 2 weeks ago. The log said he suffered a sudden seizure and required 50 milligrams of ketamine to stabilize. I clicked on another. Luna, a husky, came in for a bath. Log said she became aggressive and needed sedation. Darius was not just selling the drugs out the back door. He was creating a paper trail to cover the theft. But to make the paper trail stick, he had to use the drugs. He was dosing healthy animals. He was poisoning them, making them sick, making them unconscious just so he could log the usage and sell the rest of the bottle to his dealer. He was using these animals as living ledger entries. My stomach turned. I felt bile rise in my throat. I had built this place to save lives. My son was using it to torture the innocent to cover his gambling debts. I pulled a high-capacity flash drive from my pocket. I plugged it into the USB port. I initiated a full system backup. I wanted everything. Every log, every email, every false diagnosis. The progress bar crawled across the screen. 10%, 20%. I heard a noise outside. I froze. It was the sound of tires on gravel. Slow tires. Exploring tires. I moved to the window and peeked through the blinds. A police cruiser was rolling down the alley. Its spotlight was sweeping the building. The beam of light hit the back door. The door I had just entered. I had closed it, but had I locked it? The cruiser stopped. The spotlight stayed fixed on the door. A cop got out. He walked toward the building, his hand resting on his holster. 50%. I could not leave. If I ran out the back, I would run right into him. If I ran out the front, I would trigger the motion sensors in the lobby, which were on a separate circuit I had not bypassed. I was trapped. I looked around the room. There was nowhere to hide. It was a glass-walled fishbowl. 70%. The cop was at the door. He tried the handle. It rattled. I held my breath. 90%. The cop pulled a radio from his shoulder. Dispatch, this is Unit 4. I found an unsecured door at King's Pet Care, checking the perimeter. 100%. I yanked the drive from the port. I shut down the monitor. I grabbed my bag and dropped to the floor, crawling on my hands and knees. I needed a place to disappear. I scrambled out of the pharmacy and into the hallway. The cop was opening the back door. I could hear the hinges squeak. I saw the door to the kennel block. It was heavy soundproofed, designed to keep barking dogs from disturbing the neighbors. It was my only chance. I slipped inside the kennel block and let the door close silently behind me. The room was pitch black. The smell hit me instantly. It was not the clean smell of the lobby. It was the smell of misery, urine, feces, fear. I held my breath and listened. I could hear the cop's footsteps in the hallway outside. He was walking slowly, checking doors. I moved deeper into the room, navigating by memory. The cages lined both walls. I could hear the low whimpering of the animals. They knew someone was there. They sensed the tension. I found an empty cage at the far end. It was a large run designed for Great Danes or Mastiffs. I crawled inside and pulled the wire gate shut. I curled into a ball in the corner, pulling my dark clothes tight around me. The door to the kennel block opened. A beam of light cut through the darkness. The cop swept the light across the cages. The dogs started to bark. A cacophony of noise erupted. "Hey, quiet down!" the cop shouted. He walked down the center aisle. His light played over the cages. I pressed myself into the corner, burying my face in my knees, so the reflection of my eyes would not give me away. The light passed over my cage. It lingered for a second, then moved on. "Clear back here," the cop said into his radio. "Looks like just a mistake. Door latch must be faulty. I will secure it and clear the scene." He turned and walked out. The door closed. The darkness returned. I let out a breath I had been holding for 2 minutes. My heart was hammering so hard I thought the dogs could hear it. I waited. I heard the cruiser engine start up. I heard it drive away. I was safe. But I was not alone. In the cage next to me, something moved. It was a heavy, wet sound, like a sack of wet sand being dragged across concrete. I turned on my flashlight, shielding the lens with my fingers to let only a sliver of light escape. I shone it into the next cage. What I saw broke whatever was left of my heart. It was a Great Dane. Or it had been a Great Dane once. Now it was a skeleton wrapped in gray fur. Its ribs stuck out like the hull of a wrecked ship. Its eyes were sunken deep into its skull. It was lying in its own filth, too weak to stand. I looked at the clipboard hanging on the cage door. Patient name Titan. Owner Mrs. Gable. Diagnosis post-surgical complications. Dietary restrictions strict NPO. Nothing by mouth. I looked at the date on the chart. Titan had been here for 3 weeks. The surgery date was listed for next Tuesday. Darius wasn't treating complications. He was starving this dog. He was keeping him here, racking up boarding fees, racking up medical monitoring fees, billing the owner for IV nutrition that he clearly wasn't administering. He was torturing this animal to squeeze a few $1,000s more out of a worried owner. Titan lifted his head. It took every ounce of strength he had. He looked at me with eyes that were cloudy with pain and confusion. He let out a low whine. It wasn't a growl. It was a plea. I reached my hand through the wire mesh. Titan didn't bite. He licked my fingers. His tongue was dry and rough. "I am so sorry, boy," I whispered. Tears burned my eyes hot and angry. "I am so sorry." This wasn't just greed anymore. This was evil. Pure, distilled evil. Darius wasn't just a bad businessman. He was a sadist. He was willing to inflict suffering on the helpless to save his own skin. I thought about Courtney selling Edda's trees. I thought about Darius threatening to lock me away. I thought about the lies and the theft. But none of that compared to this. This dog was me. This dog was helpless, trapped in a cage, starving, while the people who were supposed to care for him used him for profit. I unlocked my cage and stepped out. I went to the supply cabinet in the corner. I found a bag of high-protein recovery food. I found a clean bowl. I opened Titan's cage. I sat on the floor next to him. I mixed the food with water, making a slurry. I fed him by hand small amounts so he wouldn't get sick. He ate. He ate with a desperation that shattered me. I stroked his head. I felt the ridges of his skull. "I promise you, Titan," I whispered, "you are getting out of here. And the man who did this to you is going to rot in a cage much smaller than this." I stayed there for an hour until Titan fell asleep, his head resting on my knee. I took pictures. I took pictures of the dog. I took pictures of the chart. I took pictures of the empty IV bags in the trash. I had the data. I had the ledger. But now I had the rage. This wasn't a game anymore. It wasn't a lesson. It was an execution. I stood up. I said goodbye to Titan. I locked the clinic up tight. I reset the alarm bypass. I walked back to my truck in the fog. The air felt colder now. Darius wanted to be Veterinarian of the Year. He wanted the applause. He wanted the respect. I was going to give him a spotlight. I was going to make sure the whole world saw exactly what kind of doctor he was. I drove back to the hotel where I was staying because I couldn't bear to go back to the house yet. I couldn't bear to look at my son's face without killing him. I sat on the edge of the hotel bed. I called Harrison. It was 4 a.m. "Answer the phone, Harrison." He answered on the second ring. "Otis, are you all right?" "I am not all right," I said. My voice was calm, but it was the calm of the eye of the storm. "I have the evidence, Harrison. I have it all. But plans have changed. Changed how? We are not just suing him," I said. "I want the DEA, I want the FBI, and I want the ethics board. I want them all at the gala." Otis, what did you find? I found a ghost, Harrison. I found a ghost in a cage. Just get the paperwork ready. And get me a meeting with the head of the medical board. Today. I hung up. I lay back on the bed, but I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling. Tuesday was coming. The eviction was coming. But Saturday was coming too. And on Saturday, the King family name was going to burn to the ground. And I was going to be the one holding the match. Monday morning arrived with the subtlety of a sledgehammer. The marine layer had burned off early, leaving the sun to glare relentlessly through the floor-to-ceiling windows of my living room. It was the kind of light that exposed everything. The dust motes dancing in the air, the coffee stain on the rug, the desperate sweat beating on my son's forehead. Tuesday was tomorrow. The deadline. The day the loan sharks had promised to take a finger if Darius did not pay up. The day my family had promised to throw me into a van and ship me off to the desert if I did not sign over the deed to the house. I sat in my armchair wearing my flannel shirt and my worn-out slippers. I looked small, I looked defeated. Inside, I was a coiled spring. I had the images of the starving dog Titan burned into my retinas. I had the digital copy of the drug ledger in my pocket. I had the rage of a father who realized he had raised a monster. But on the outside, I was just an old man staring at the ocean waiting for the executioner. Darius and Courtney did not knock. They stormed in. Darius looked like he hadn't slept in 48 hours. His eyes were bloodshot and his hands were shaking. Courtney looked perfect as always, but her jaw was set so tight I thought her teeth might crack. "It is time," Dad Darius said. His voice was hoarse. He threw a stack of papers onto the coffee table. "This is the quitclaim deed. It transfers the title of the property to me and Courtney immediately. Sign it." I looked at the papers. They had not even bothered to hire a real lawyer. These were template forms downloaded from the internet. They were sloppy just like them, and if I don't, I asked, my voice trembling just enough to sell the performance. "Then the van is here in an hour," Courtney said, stepping forward. She smelled of expensive vanilla and cruelty. "We called Dr. Evans. He signed the emergency committal order this morning. He agrees that you are a danger to yourself. We will have you sedated and transported to gentle horizons before lunch. You will never see this view again, Otis." She wasn't bluffing. They were terrified. The debt was due and I was their only asset. I looked at Darius. I wanted to see if there was any hesitation, any flicker of conscience. There was none, just the cold, hard stare of a junkie needing a fix. He would sell his father to save his fingers. I let out a long, shaky sigh. I slumped deeper into the chair. I let my hands drop to my lap. "I am tired," I whispered. "I am so tired of fighting you two." "Good," Darius said, uncapping a pen. "Then stop fighting. Sign." I looked out at the ocean. I thought about Etta. I thought about the legacy we had tried to build, a legacy of hard work, of integrity, a legacy my son was trying to snort and gamble away. "You win," I said softly. "I will go. I don't want to be a burden anymore." Courtney let out a breath she had been holding. Finally, she muttered. But I continued raising a hand to stop Darius from shoving the pen into my fingers. "But if I am going to leave this house, if I am going to lose the only thing I have left of your mother, I want to do it right." "What does that mean?" Darius snapped. "Right means you sign the paper and we sell it. Today." "No," I said, shaking my head. "If you sell it today, it just looks like a fire sale. It looks desperate. People will talk. They will say, 'Otis King lost his mind and his son sold his house for scraps.'" Courtney narrowed her eyes. "What are you suggesting, Otis?" I sat up a little straighter. I tapped into the part of my brain that used to negotiate multi-million-dollar contracts. I had to sell this perfectly. "I want to make a donation," I said. Darius laughed a harsh barking sound. "A donation? You want to give the money away? Are you crazy? We need the cash, Dad." "Listen to me," I said, putting a little steel in my voice. "Just a little. Enough to make them listen. I am not talking about giving it to strangers. I am talking about a legacy. For you, Darius." Darius stopped laughing. "For me?" "Yes," I said. "I have been thinking. You are up for Veterinarian of the Year on Saturday. It is a big deal. The governor will be there." So Darius asked, but I saw the vanity flare in his eyes. "If we just sell the house and put the cash in your pocket, you have to pay taxes." I lied. "Capital gains, inheritance tax. The government will take 40%. And it looks common. But if we create a charitable trust, the Darius King Veterinary Development Fund, and we donate the house to the fund. I paused, letting the words sink in. Courtney stepped closer. Her eyes were calculating. Go on. If we donate the house to a fund that you control, I said, looking at Darius, you avoid the taxes. The value of the house stays intact. $3 million. And as the chairman of the fund, you control the assets. You can pay yourself a salary for administration. You can take out loans against the fund's assets for investment purposes. And best of all, you look like a saint. I saw the gears turning in Courtney's head. She was a consultant. She knew how nonprofits worked. She knew they were often just piggy banks for the rich. She was thinking about administrative fees. She was thinking about expense accounts. She was thinking about tax shelters. And Darius. Darius was thinking about the applause, loans against the assets. Darius asked, his voice dropping. You mean I could get cash out immediately? Of course, I said. It is your fund. You set the bylaws. You can borrow against the equity of the house the day the fund is established. And you pay it back whenever you want, interest-free. It was nonsense. Legal gibberish. But to a desperate man and a greedy woman, it sounded like salvation. And think about Saturday, I added, delivering the hook. Imagine standing on that stage. The governor is there. The press is there. And you announce that you and your wife have established a $3 million fund to help animals. You won't just win the award, son. You will be a hero. You will be untouchable. Darius looked at Courtney. I could see the lust in his eyes. Not for her, but for the image I had painted. He saw himself in a tuxedo holding a giant check, flashing bulbs, saving his reputation. And the loan sharks. He could borrow against the fund on Monday, pay them off, and still be the golden boy of the medical community. It is brilliant, Courtney whispered. She looked at me with a strange new respect. It is actually brilliant. We bypass the probate taxes, we control the liquid capital, and the branding opportunities are insane. But the deadline, Darius said, the eviction is Tuesday. If we do this, I said, I will sign the papers to transfer the house into the trust immediately. Today. You can show that to your investors. Show them you have $3 million in a trust under your control. They will wait a few days for the liquidity if they know the collateral is secured. Darius nodded slowly. Yeah, they will wait. If I show them the deed is in the trust. So we have a deal, I asked. I will sign the house over. But not to you directly, to the fund. And we announce it at the gala on Saturday. And you go to the nursing home on Sunday? Courtney clarified. I nodded. Sunday. I will pack my bags. Just let me have this week. Let me have one last week in my home and let me see my son become a hero. Darius looked at the quitclaim deed on the table. He picked it up and ripped it in half. Okay, Dad, he said. We do it your way. We set up the fund. I leaned back in the chair. The tension in my chest released slightly. They had taken the bait. They were so blinded by greed and ego that they didn't ask the important questions. They didn't ask who would draft the trust. They didn't ask about the oversight committee. They just heard $3 million and control. Call your lawyer, Courtney told me. Get him to draft the trust documents. We want to see them tonight. I will call Harrison, I said. He is the best with contracts. Do it, Darius said. And Dad, don't try anything funny. If that trust isn't set up by Saturday morning, the van comes back. I won't try anything, I said. I just want to help you, son. They left the room to go discuss their victory in the kitchen. I heard Courtney already planning how to spend her administrative salary. I heard Darius calling his bookie probably to beg for a few more days. I waited until they were out of earshot. Then I pulled out the burner phone. I dialed Harrison. They took it, I whispered. I knew they would. Harrison said, his voice crisp and professional. Greed is predictable, Otis. I have the papers ready. Make sure the wording is specific, I said. The Darius King Veterinary Development Fund. It is drafted, Harrison assured me. But Otis, you know what happens once you sign this. The house is gone. It belongs to the state board. I know, I said, looking at the walls I had built. I know, Harrison. But it is the price of ammunition. And the oversight clause, Harrison asked. Ironclad, I said. The fund is to be administered by the State Veterinary Ethics Board, not the founder. Make sure that clause is buried deep in the bylaws on page 50. They won't read it. They never read the fine print. You are a dangerous man, Otis King Harrison said with a chuckle. I am just a father cleaning up a mess, I said. One more thing, Harrison. What is it? I need you to call the chairman of the medical board, Dr. Darius. Tell him we have a major announcement for the gala. Tell him the King family is making the largest donation in the history of the board. He will be ecstatic, Harrison said. He will clear the schedule. Good. Tell him I will be presenting the check personally. I hung up the phone. I sat there for a moment listening to the ocean. I had just promised to give away everything I owned. My retirement, my security, my home. But as I looked down at my hands, scarred and strong, I felt lighter than I had in years. I wasn't losing my home. I was weaponizing it. Darius and Courtney came back into the room. They were smiling. They poured themselves drinks from my bar without asking. To the fund, Courtney said, raising her glass. To the future, Darius added, clinking his glass against hers. I watched them drink. They looked so happy, so confident. They thought they had just pulled off the heist of the century. They thought they had manipulated the old man into giving them the keys to the kingdom. They didn't know that the kingdom was rigged to blow. Dad, Darius said, turning to me, you should get a suit for Saturday. You can't wear that flannel on stage. I don't have a suit that fits anymore, I mumbled. I will find one of your old ones, Courtney said magnanimously. We will get it dry cleaned. We need you to look presentable when you hand over the check. It is good for the image. Thank you, I said. I looked at my son. I really looked at him. I tried to find the boy who used to cry when he found a hurt bird in the yard. I tried to find the young man who swore the veterinary oath to protect animal life. But he was gone. Consumed by the man standing in front of me, the man who starved dogs and poisoned his own father's peace of mind. I'm going to take a nap, I said, standing up slowly. It has been a big day. Go ahead, Dad, Darius said, dismissing me. We have work to do. We have to plan the acceptance speech. I walked to my bedroom. I closed the door. I didn't nap. I went to my closet and pulled out the suit I had hidden in the back. It wasn't an old suit. It was a custom-tailored charcoal wool suit I had bought last year for a funeral I never attended. I brushed the dust off the shoulders. I wasn't going to wear the old rags they picked out for me. On Saturday, I was going to wear armor. Tuesday passed without the eviction van. Wednesday passed with flurry of legal documents that Harrison sent over. Darius and Courtney signed them without reading more than the title page. They saw the words, $3 million in transfer of deed, and their eyes glazed over with dollar signs. They didn't see the clause about the oversight committee. They didn't see the clause about criminal background checks for administrators. They didn't see the trap. Thursday came. I spent it in the garden saying goodbye to the plants that were left. Friday came. The tension in the house was electric. Darius was on the phone constantly assuring his creditors that the money was coming on Monday. Courtney was buying dresses online, spending money she didn't have yet. And then it was Saturday, the day of the gala. I woke up at 5 a.m. I fed the seagulls off the deck one last time. Today was the day I became homeless. Today was the day I became a pauper. But today was also the day I took out the trash. I looked at the sunrise painting the ocean gold. It is a good day for a demolition, I whispered to the wind. I went inside to get dressed. The game was over. The execution was about to begin. Tuesday night arrived like a fever dream wrapped in silk and smelling of expensive gin. The ink on the fraudulent trust documents was barely dry, but my house was already occupied territory. Courtney did not want to wait for the gala on Saturday to celebrate. She wanted to plant her flag on the summit immediately. She called it a pre-gala mixer. I called it an invasion. The living room was filled with people I did not know. There were about 20 of them. Women with faces pulled tight by expensive surgery, and men who looked like they sold timeshares in hell. They were drinking my vintage scotch. They were ashing on my floors. They were treating my home like a hotel lobby they had just bought for pennies on the dollar. I sat in my armchair in the corner, the same chair where I had feigned weakness just yesterday. I was wearing my old cardigan and my slippers. To them, I was just a piece of furniture, a prop, a relic that came with the house like the chandelier or the fireplace. "Oh, don't mind him," Courtney said to a woman in a silver dress. "That is just Otis. He is harmless. He likes to watch the people. It stimulates his brain, what is left of it anyway." The woman laughed, a tinkling sound like breaking glass. Is he safe? I mean, should he be wandering around loose? Courtney waved her hand dismissively. He is fine. He barely knows where he is. Besides, after this weekend, he will be in a facility that can handle his special needs. We are just letting him have one last night of normalcy before the transition. I gripped the armrests of my chair. Transition. That was a nice word for throwing me into a van and dumping me in the desert. I watched Courtney work the room. She was in her element. She was wearing a red dress that cost more than my truck. She was holding a crystal flute of champagne. She was radiant with the glow of victory. She thought she had won the lottery. She thought she had pulled off the perfect crime. But Courtney had a weakness, a structural flaw I had identified weeks ago. She was desperate for approval. She wanted to be part of the elite. She wanted to be accepted by the Platinum Coast Ladies Club, an exclusive group of the wealthiest women in Malibu. These were women who ran charities, who owned galleries, who controlled the social calendar of the entire coast. Courtney had been applying for membership for 3 years and had been rejected every time. She did not know that Mrs. Vanderhoven, the founder of the club, was a former client of mine. I had retrofitted the foundation of her cliffside mansion 10 years ago to save it from sliding into the ocean. I had also set up her secure home network because she did not trust the Geek Squad. She trusted me. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. I kept it low hidden by the folds of my cardigan. I logged into the private social media app the club used. I had the admin access saved. I found the group chat. It was active. The ladies were discussing the upcoming gala. I looked at Courtney. She was standing by the fireplace, her back to me, holding court with 3 other women who looked like they were trying very hard to be impressed by her. I tapped the camera icon. I selected Go Live. I titled the stream The Truth Behind the Donation. I pointed the camera at Courtney. The angle was perfect. It looked like a security camera feed or a fly-on-the-wall perspective. The audio picked up immediately, crisp and clear. I hit broadcast. So tell us, Courtney, one of the women asked, leaning in. How did you manage such a massive donation? $3 million is incredibly generous. Courtney took a long sip of champagne. Her eyes were glassy. She was already drunk on power and alcohol. Well, you know how it is, she said, lowering her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. Darius and I have been planning this for years. We wanted to make a splash. We wanted to show the community that we are serious about philanthropy. But the house, the woman pressed. Isn't that your father-in-law's house? Courtney laughed. Oh, him. Look at him over there. He is practically a vegetable. He does not know what he owns. We had to guide his hand to sign the papers. Literally. He thought he was signing a birthday card. My phone screen lit up with comments. Is she serious? Oh my God, that is elder abuse. I thought she said he was lucid. I kept the camera steady. So you tricked him? Another woman asked, a blonde with sharp eyes. Tricked is such a harsh word, Courtney said, giggling. We managed him. We facilitated the transfer of assets to more capable hands. He was just sitting on this property, letting it rot. We are going to monetize it. The fund pays us an administrative fee, of course, and we get to live in the house as caretakers. It is a win-win. We get the money, the status, and the house. And he gets a nice room at a facility in Nevada where he cannot hurt himself. Disgusting. Who is this woman? I am canceling my consultation with her tomorrow. The comments were scrolling faster now. Mrs. Vanderhoven herself joined the chat. This is admissible in court, ladies. Keep watching. Courtney took another drink. She was on a roll now. She wanted to brag. She wanted to show these women how smart she was. Honestly, it was easy, she said. Old people are so trusting. You just have to tell them what they want to hear. We told him he was going to be a hero. We told him Darius was going to be famous. He ate it up. He gave us everything. And the best part is he thinks we are doing him a favor. She looked over at me and raised her glass in a mocking toast. To Otis, she said loudly, the best investor we never had. The women around her laughed, but it was nervous laughter. They were sensing something was wrong. They were sensing the malice rolling off her. I ended the stream. I put the phone back in my pocket. I sat there and watched her. She had just confessed to fraud, elder abuse, and conspiracy to a room full of the most powerful women in the city. Her reputation was dead. Her consulting business was dead. She was a social pariah walking, and she didn't even know it yet. Tomorrow, her phone would stop ringing. Her emails would go unanswered. The invitations would stop coming. She would be iced out of society so fast she would get frostbite, but she was still smiling. She was still celebrating. Darius came into the room. He was sweating and his tie was loose. He looked like a man who was running from a fire. He went straight to the bar and poured himself a double whiskey. He didn't look at me. He didn't look at Courtney. He looked at his phone, checking messages probably from the loan sharks he had promised to pay on Monday. Just then, Buster walked in. Buster was my 12-year-old spaniel. He was deaf in one ear and had a limp, but he was the best friend I had in this house. He waddled into the living room, tail wagging, confused by the noise and the strangers. He saw Darius. He trotted over to him, hoping for a scrap of food or a pat on the head. He barked once, a low woof of greeting. Darius snapped. The stress, the fear, the alcohol, it all boiled over. He spun around and kicked the dog. It wasn't a shove, it was a kick. His dress shoe connected with Buster's ribs.
"Get away from me, you stupid mutt!"
Darius screamed.
"Get out of here!"
Buster yelped, a high-pitched sound of pain and betrayal. He scurried backward, slipping on the hardwood floor, his legs scrambling for traction. He cowered under the coffee table, shaking. The room went silent. The laughter stopped. The music seemed to fade away. Something inside me snapped. I forgot the plan. I forgot the long game. I forgot the engineer who waits for the perfect moment. I stood up. I didn't stand up like an old man. I stood up like a steel beam being driven into the earth. I crossed the room in 2 strides. Darius was reaching for his glass again, muttering curses. I grabbed his wrist. My hand wrapped around his forearm like a vice. I squeezed. I felt the bones grind together. I felt the tendons pop. Darius gasped, dropping the glass. It shattered on the floor, spraying whiskey and shards of crystal over his expensive shoes. He looked up at me. His eyes were wide with shock. He expected to see the confused, senile old man. He saw his father. He saw the man who had built bridges over raging rivers. He saw the man who had stared down union bosses and corrupt inspectors. "Don't," I said. My voice was low, a rumble of thunder from deep in the earth. "Do not touch the dog." Darius tried to pull away. He couldn't. I held him there, frozen. "Dad," he stammered. Dad let go. "You are hurting me." I leaned in close. I looked into his eyes and I saw the emptiness there. I saw the fear. "You are weak, Darius," I whispered. "You kick dogs because you are afraid of men. You steal from fathers because you cannot build for yourself. You are small." For a second, I saw the realization dawn on him. He saw that I was lucid. He saw that I was strong. But then the denial kicked in. The arrogance returned. He laughed a nervous, high-pitched sound. He is having an episode, he shouted to the room, trying to salvage the moment. He is aggressive. It is the dementia. He does not know what he is doing. He wrenched his arm free. He rubbed his wrist, stepping back. "Go back to your chair, old man," he hissed at me. "Before I call the orderlies right now." I looked at him. I looked at Courtney, who was staring at me with her mouth open. I looked at the guests who were watching the scene with a mixture of horror and fascination. I had broken character. I had shown my strength. But it didn't matter. They were too drunk on their own narrative to see the truth. They thought it was just a flash of hysterical strength, an old man's tantrum. I stepped back. I let my shoulders slump again. I let the fire in my eyes die down. "I am sorry," I mumbled, backing away. I like the dog. The dog is a good boy." Darius laughed again, relief washing over his face. "Yeah, Dad, the dog is fine. Just go sit down. You are ruining the party." I walked back to my chair. I sat down. I called Buster over. He crawled out from under the table and rested his head on my knee. I stroked his soft ears. I looked at Darius. He was pouring another drink, his hand shaking. He didn't know it, but that kick was the final signature on his death warrant. I had been willing to destroy his career. I had been willing to take his money. But now I was going to take his freedom. I looked at the phone in my pocket. The live stream had ended, but the video was saved. I forwarded it to Harrison. I forwarded it to the medical board. And then I sent a text to the private investigator I had hired 3 days ago. "Add animal cruelty to the list. We have a witness." I sat in the corner and watched them celebrate. I watched them drink my liquor and laugh in my home. Enjoy it, I thought. Enjoy the party, because the hangover is going to last for the rest of your lives. I held Buster close. Saturday was coming, and I was bringing hell with me. Saturday morning arrived with a sky the color of a fresh bruise. The marine layer was heavy, hanging low over the cliffs of Malibu, obscuring the ocean view that my family was so desperate to steal. It was fitting weather for a funeral, and in a way that is exactly what today was. I was burying my son. Not his body, but the last shred of hope that he could be redeemed. I sat at the kitchen table drinking black coffee from a chipped mug. I watched Darius pacing the living room. He was on the phone again, his voice a tight whisper of panic and bravado. He was telling his loan shark that the money was secure. He was promising a wire transfer first thing Monday morning. He was lying to a man who broke kneecaps for a living, and he looked like he was about to vomit. Courtney swept into the room carrying a garment bag as if it were a dead body she wanted to dispose of. She threw it onto the chair next to me. A cloud of dust and the stale smell of mothballs puffed into the air. "Put this on," she said without looking at me. She was too busy inspecting her pores in a handheld mirror. I unzipped the bag. Inside was a suit I hadn't worn since 1995. It was a synthetic blend, a cheap polyester monstrosity in a shade of brown that looked like mud. It was 2 sizes too big for me now. The cuffs were frayed. There was a stain on the lapel from a wedding reception 3 decades ago. "I cannot wear this," I said, keeping my voice low and trembling. "It smells like a basement. I have a nice blue suit in the closet. The one Etta bought me." "No." Darius snapped, spinning around. He ended his call and marched over to me. "You are not wearing the blue suit. You are wearing this one." "Why?" I asked, looking up at him with wide, confused eyes. "I want to look nice for your big night, son. I want to make you proud. You will make me proud by looking exactly like what you are," Darius hissed. "A charity case." He grabbed the lapel of the brown suit and shook it. "Listen to me, Dad. Tonight is about contrast. I am going to be on that stage in a $3,000 tuxedo accepting the Veterinarian of the Year award. I am going to be the picture of success, the picture of the future, and you are going to be the picture of the past. You are the poor, confused father that I graciously take care of." Courtney chimed in, snapping her compact shut. "It is part of the narrative, Otis. The donors need to see that Darius is a saint. They need to see him supporting a burden. If you show up looking sharp and competent, it ruins the image. We need you to look pathetic. It helps with the sympathy donations." I looked at the suit. I looked at them. They wanted a prop. They wanted a scarecrow to stand next to them so they would shine brighter. They didn't realize that a man in a $3,000 tuxedo looks even worse when he is standing next to the father he is robbing. "Okay," I said, letting my shoulders slump. "Okay, I will wear the brown suit. I just want to help." "Good," Darius said, checking his watch. "Now go get changed. We leave in 4 hours. And Dad, do not try to fix your hair. The messier, the better." I took the suit and shuffled toward my bedroom. But I didn't go in. I stopped at the hallway table where I had left my car keys. "I need to go to the pharmacy," I mumbled loud enough for them to hear. "I am out of my heart pills. I feel a little flutter in my chest." Darius rolled his eyes. "You are fine, Dad. You are healthy as a horse." "I need the pills, Darius," I said, putting a little whine in my voice. "If I don't take them, I might have an episode at the gala. I might fall down. I might make a scene." That got their attention. The last thing they wanted was for me to die on stage before I signed the ceremonial check. "Fine," Courtney sighed. "Go. But be back in an hour. And do not talk to anyone. If anyone asks you how you are doing, you just smile and nod. Do not try to form sentences." I grabbed the keys to my rusted Ford truck. I walked out the front door, leaving the brown suit on the hallway bench. The drive to the post office was the longest drive of my life. The heavy envelopes were sitting on the passenger seat next to me. There were 3 of them. They were thick, taped shut, and addressed in bold block letters. One was addressed to the Federal Bureau of Investigation, Los Angeles Field Office, White Collar Crimes Division. One was addressed to the Drug Enforcement Administration Diversion Control Division. One was addressed to the State Veterinary Medical Ethics Board. Inside those envelopes was the end of Darius King. The flash drives with the inventory logs showing the theft of thousands of doses of ketamine. The photos of the second set of books proving tax fraud and money laundering. The videos of the starving dogs in the kennel. The recordings of Courtney conspiring to commit elder abuse and fraud. I parked the truck in front of the post office. It was Saturday, so the lobby was closed, but the blue metal drop boxes outside were open. I sat there for a long time. My hand hovered over the envelopes. This was my son. I remembered the day I brought him home from the hospital. He was so small. I remembered holding him in the palm of my hand, marveling at how something so fragile could take up so much space in my heart. I remembered teaching him to ride a bike. I remembered his graduation. I remembered the pride I felt when he opened his clinic. How did we get here? How did the boy who cried over a broken wing turn into a man who starved dogs for profit? I knew the answer. I had given him too much. I had shielded him from every consequence. I had paid every debt, fixed every mistake, smoothed every road. I thought I was being a good father. I thought I was giving him the life I never had. But I wasn't. I was robbing him of his character. I was teaching him that he was entitled to a safety net that other people had to weave for him. And when the net wasn't there, he decided to cut me up to make one. I looked at the envelopes again. If I dropped these in the box, there was no going back. Darius would go to prison for a long time. He would lose his license. He would lose his freedom. He would likely lose his life if the loan sharks got to him inside. But then I thought about Titan, the Great Dane starving in the cage. I thought about the other animals he had hurt. I thought about the people he had defrauded. And I thought about Etta. I picked up the framed photo of her that I kept on the dashboard. She was smiling, wearing her nurse's uniform. Etta had been the head nurse at County General for 20 years. She was the toughest woman I ever knew. She had a code: you do no harm. And if you see harm being done, you stop it. She once reported a surgeon, a man she had worked with for 10 years, because she smelled alcohol on his breath before a procedure. She didn't hesitate. She didn't care about his career or his family. She cared about the patient on the table. She would be ashamed of Darius, but she would be even more ashamed of me if I let him continue. I opened the truck door. I walked to the blue box. The metal was cold under my hand. "I am sorry, son," I whispered. I pushed the envelopes into the slot. 1, 2, 3. I heard them drop into the dark belly of the box. Thud, thud, thud. It was done. The mechanism of justice was in motion. It might take a few days for the agents to review the files, but the clock had started. I got back in the truck. I didn't feel happy. I didn't feel relief. I felt hollow, like a building that had been gutted by fire, leaving only the steel frame standing. But the frame was strong. The frame would hold. I drove back to the house. I stopped at the pharmacy on the way and bought a bottle of aspirin just to have a prop. When I walked back into the house, the atmosphere had shifted from panic to a frantic sort of vanity. The house smelled of hairspray and expensive cologne. Courtney was standing in the middle of the living room wearing a gold sequined gown that looked like it was made of liquid money. It was backless tight and screamed for attention. She was yelling at a makeup artist she had hired. "More contour," she barked. "I need to look sharp. I need to look like money. The cameras are going to be high definition." Darius was in the bedroom struggling with his bow tie. He was wearing a midnight blue tuxedo with black lapels. He looked handsome. He looked successful. He looked like a lie. I walked past them, invisible as always. I went to my room and put on the brown suit. It was itchy. The fabric didn't breathe. The pants were too short, exposing my ankles. The jacket hung off my shoulders like a sack. I looked in the mirror. I looked like a man who had given up. Perfect. I walked out into the living room. Courtney stopped yelling at the makeup artist and looked me up and down. She smirked. "Well, at least you are consistent," she said. "You look tragic, Otis. Absolutely tragic. It is perfect. The donors are going to eat it up. They love a sob story." Darius came out, adjusting his cufflinks. He looked at me and nodded. "Good job, Dad. Just remember the plan. We get to the Ritz. We do the red carpet. You stay 2 steps behind us. When we get to the table, you sit down and you stay down. Do not talk to the press. Do not talk to the governor. When they call my name, I go up. I give the speech. Then I call you up. You hand me the oversized check. You smile. You shake my hand. And then you get off the stage immediately." "I understand, son," I said, my voice soft. "I just hand you the check." "Right," Darius said. "And don't drop it." The limousine arrived at 6. It was a stretch Hummer white and gaudy. Courtney insisted on it. She wanted to make an entrance. We piled in. Darius poured champagne. He didn't offer me any. "This is it, babe," he said to Courtney, raising his glass. "After tonight we are made. The fund is going to be the biggest thing in the state. We can borrow against it on Monday, pay off the guys, and then we are free. We are untouchable." Courtney kissed him, leaving a smear of red lipstick on his cheek. She wiped it off with her thumb. "We earned this," she said. "We worked so hard for this." I sat on the opposite bench, staring out the tinted window as the coast flashed by. They worked hard. They worked hard at theft. They worked hard at deception. Courtney turned her gaze to me. Her eyes were cold diamonds. "Listen to me, old man," she said, leaning forward. "I want to make sure you understand what happens after the party." I looked at her, blinking slowly. After the party. Yes, she said. Tonight you sleep here. But tomorrow morning the van comes. Sunday is moving day. I nodded. Sunday. But tonight, she continued, a cruel smile playing on her lips. Tonight, you are not sleeping in the guest room. I need that room for the gifts, and I don't want you wandering around the house ruining the vibe of our victory. So where do I sleep? I asked. There is a cot in the shed, she said. The gardening shed out back. It is dry. It has a lock. You will sleep there. It is just for one night. Think of it as camping. You like camping, right? The shed. It was a 10 by 10 tin box where the gardener kept the lawnmower and the fertilizer. It smelled of gasoline and dirt. It was cold. It was full of spiders. She wanted to lock me in a shed like an animal, like Titan. Darius looked away, pretending to be interested in his phone. He couldn't even look at me. He was letting his wife put his father in a shed, and he didn't have the spine to say a word. I felt a strange calm wash over me. It was the calm of a man who knows the ending of the movie while everyone else is still guessing. I looked at Courtney. I looked her right in the eyes. I didn't blink. I didn't tremble. She frowned slightly, sensing a shift, but she couldn't place it. "What are you staring at?" she snapped. I smiled. It wasn't the confused smile of a senile man. It was the sharp, cutting smile of an engineer who has just found the fatal flaw in the design. "You are right, Courtney," I said, my voice steady and clear. "It is going to be a memorable night. And you are right about the sleeping arrangements, too." "What are you talking about?" she asked, narrowing her eyes. I leaned back, crossing my arms over the cheap polyester suit. "I am just agreeing with you," I said. "After everything that is going to happen tonight, I can guarantee you one thing. There is definitely going to be someone from this family sleeping in a very small, very tight, concrete room." Courtney laughed, but it was a nervous sound. "You are rambling, Otis. Just shut up and look out the window." She went back to her champagne. She went back to her dreams of wealth. She didn't understand. She thought I was talking about the shed. She didn't know I was talking about a cell in the Federal Correctional Institution. The limo slowed down. We were pulling into the driveway of the Ritz-Carlton. The lights were bright, the cameras were flashing, the red carpet was waiting. I buttoned my jacket, I adjusted my collar. It was showtime. I was ready to give the performance of a lifetime. And when the curtain fell, I was going to be the only one left standing on the stage. The ballroom of the Ritz-Carlton was a cavern of crystal and gold filled with the low hum of expensive conversation and the clinking of champagne flutes. 500 of the wealthiest people in the state were packed into the room, sitting at round tables draped in white linen. The air conditioner was working overtime to battle the heat generated by so many egos in one space. I stood off to the side near the kitchen service doors, exactly where Courtney had told me to stand. I was wearing the brown polyester suit that smelled of mothballs and defeat. To the passing waiters, I looked like a lost grandfather who had wandered away from his nursing home. To the security guards, I looked like a harmless relic. Nobody looked at me twice. That is the power of being underestimated. You become a ghost in the room, and ghosts see everything. I watched my son sitting at the center table. The table cost $25,000 for the night. Darius was laughing, throwing his head back at something the governor said. He looked radiant. He looked like a prince who had just inherited the kingdom. His tuxedo fit him perfectly. His teeth were white. His hands, the same hands that had injected poison into healthy dogs, were resting casually on the table, holding a crystal glass. Beside him, Courtney was a vision in gold sequins. She was leaning in, whispering to the wife of the medical board chairman, touching her arm with a familiarity that was entirely calculated. She was working the room, building the network she planned to exploit once the money from my house hit their account on Monday. They were celebrating a victory that hadn't happened yet. They were toasting to a crime they thought was perfect. The lights in the ballroom dimmed. A spotlight hit the stage. The chatter died down, replaced by polite applause. Dr. Darius, the chairman of the Veterinary Medical Board, walked to the podium. He was a good man, a man who loved animals, but he was also a man who loved donations, and Darius had promised him the biggest one in history. "Ladies and gentlemen," Dr. Darius boomed, his voice echoing through the massive speakers. "Tonight we are here to honor excellence. We are here to honor compassion. We are here to honor a man who represents the very best of our profession. A man who has dedicated his life to the care of those who cannot speak for themselves." I felt a wave of nausea roll through my stomach. The hypocrisy was thick enough to choke on. I thought about Titan shivering in his cage. I thought about the fake ledgers. I thought about the lies. Please welcome Dr. Aris, continued our veterinarian of the year, Dr. Darius King. The room erupted. The applause was thunderous. Darius stood up. He buttoned his jacket with a flourish. He kissed Courtney. He shook the governor's hand. He walked to the stage with a stride that said he owned the world. He bounded up the steps and took the microphone. He looked out at the sea of faces and he smiled. It was the smile of a sociopath. "Thank you," he said, his voice thick with fake emotion. "Thank you all. This award means more to me than words can say." When I was a little boy, I used to watch my father work. He was an engineer. He built bridges. He taught me that a structure is only as strong as its foundation. I clenched my fists in my pockets. He was using me. He was using my life, my work, as a prop for his lies. "And that is what I have tried to do with my practice," Darius continued. "I have tried to build a foundation of care, a foundation of ethics. Because animals are family. They are not just pets. They are souls. And it is our sacred duty to protect them, to heal them, and to never ever do them harm." I looked around the room. People were wiping tears from their eyes. They were eating it up. They saw a saint. They didn't see the wolf in the tuxedo. "But I cannot take credit for this alone," Darius said, turning his gaze toward the back of the room, toward the shadows where he knew I was hiding. "I stand here on the shoulders of giants. My father Otis King is here tonight. He is a simple man, a humble man. But he has taught me everything I know about generosity." The spotlight swung around. It swept across the room, searching for the prop. It found me. The light blinded me for a second. I blinked. I hunched my shoulders, letting the brown suit hang off me like a sack. I looked confused, terrified. "Dad, come up here," Darius called out, beckoning to me. "Come share this moment." The applause started again, polite but insistent. Courtney stood up and walked over to me. She grabbed my arm with a grip that was painful. "Move, old man," she hissed through her smiling teeth. "Do not trip. Do not drool. Just get up there, hand him the envelope, and get off." She marched me toward the stage. I shuffled my feet. I let my head hang low. I walked up the stairs, holding the railing with both hands as if I were afraid of falling. Darius met me at the podium. He put his arm around my shoulders. He squeezed tight. It looked like a hug. It was actually a restraint. "Ladies and gentlemen," Darius said, his voice dropping to a reverent whisper, "my father has been battling health issues lately. His memory isn't what it used to be. But his heart is as big as ever. Tonight, in a final act of incredible generosity before he enters assisted living, he has decided to make a donation that will change the future of veterinary medicine." He looked at me. His eyes were hard. "Go ahead, Dad," he whispered. "Give them the news." He stepped back, giving me the microphone. He expected me to mumble a few words, hand him the ceremonial check we had prepared, and then shuffle away into the darkness. He expected the old man. He expected the victim. I stood there for a moment, gripping the lectern. The wood felt solid under my hands, solid like a steel beam, solid like a sledgehammer. I looked out at the audience. I saw the governor. I saw the wealthy donors. I saw the press cameras flashing. And then I saw something else. In the back of the room, the doors opened quietly. 4 men in dark suits entered. They didn't look like guests. They moved with precision. They lined up against the back wall. It was time. I took a deep breath. I inhaled the expensive air of the Ritz-Carlton. And as I exhaled, I let the old man die. I straightened my spine. I stood up to my full height of 6'2". I rolled my shoulders back, shedding the weight of the brown suit, shedding the weight of the lies, shedding the weight of my son's betrayal. I stopped trembling. My hands became steady rocks. I looked at Darius. He frowned. He saw the change. He saw the sudden sharpness in my eyes. The confusion was gone. The fear was gone. In its place was the chief engineer, the man who commanded respect, the man who didn't tolerate structural failure. I leaned into the microphone. My voice didn't waver. It boomed. It filled the hall with a resonance that startled the front row. "Good evening," I said. "My name is Otis King." The silence in the room changed. It went from polite attention to confused curiosity. This wasn't the voice of a senile man. This was the voice of authority. "My son tells you that a structure is only as strong as its foundation," I continued. "And he is right. But he forgot the second rule of engineering. If you build on a foundation of lies, the collapse is inevitable." Darius stepped forward, his smile faltering. "Dad, what are you doing? Just give the donation." I ignored him. I looked directly into the camera lens at the back of the room. My son brought me here tonight to announce a donation, I said. He told you I am sick. He told you I am confused. He told you I am moving to a facility. I paused. I let the tension build. None of that is true. I am not sick. I am not confused. And I am certainly not going anywhere. Courtney started walking toward the stage, her eyes wide with panic. She was signaling for the security guards, but they were looking at me mesmerized. However, I continued raising my voice over the rising murmur of the crowd. I am here to make a donation, a very large donation. Darius relaxed slightly. He thought I was going off script, but still delivering the money. He thought he could salvage this. I am donating my home, I said, clearly enunciating every syllable. My estate in Malibu valued at $3 million. Darius smiled again. He nodded encouragingly. I am donating the entire value of the property, I said, turning to look my son in the eye, to the newly formed Legal Defense Fund against veterinary fraud. The room went dead silent. You could hear a pin drop. You could hear Darius's heart stop. Darius froze. His smile stayed plastered on his face, but his eyes went dead. What did you say? He whispered. I turned back to the microphone. This fund, I declared, my voice ringing like a bell, has a specific mandate. Its sole purpose is to investigate, prosecute, and revoke the licenses of veterinarians who abuse their power. Veterinarians who traffic narcotics. Veterinarians who falsify records. And veterinarians who starve animals for profit. The crowd gasped. A collective intake of breath that sucked the oxygen out of the room. Darius lunged for me. He forgot the cameras. He forgot the governor. He forgot the act. Dad, stop, he screamed, reaching for the microphone. You are senile. You don't know what you are saying. I didn't move. I didn't flinch. I reached into my jacket pocket. I didn't pull out a check. I pulled out a remote control. It was a simple presentation clicker connected to the AV system. I had paid the audio-visual technician $500 an hour ago to swap Darius's tribute video with my own file. I pressed the button. The massive screen behind us, which had been displaying a photo of Darius smiling with a puppy, flickered. The image changed. It wasn't a puppy anymore. It was a video. Grainy night vision footage. It showed a man in a white coat standing in a pharmacy. He was taking bottles off a shelf. He was stuffing them into a gym bag. It was Darius. I pressed the button again. The image changed. It was a photo of a ledger, a handwritten list of drug sales with dates and amounts. I pressed the button again. The image changed to a dog, a Great Dane, Titan. He was lying in a cage, skeletal and dying. The gasp from the crowd turned into a roar of horror. People stood up. Chairs scraped against the floor. That is my son, I said, pointing at the screen. That is the veterinarian of the year. He has been selling ketamine to drug dealers. He has been torturing animals to cover his theft. And he tried to have me committed to an asylum to steal my home and pay his debts. Darius stood center stage, paralyzed. He looked at the screen. He looked at the crowd. He looked at me. He looked small. He looked like a building that had just lost its load-bearing walls. That is a lie, he shrieked, his voice cracking. My father is crazy. These are deepfakes. This is not real. I pressed the button one last time. The audio played over the speakers. It was crisp. It was clear. We make him really lose his mind. We switch his medications. We hide his things. In a month, any doctor will certify that he is mentally ill. It was Benjamin's voice, or rather Darius's voice. The nickname I used for him in my head was gone. This was Darius, and everyone in the room recognized his voice. Courtney froze at the bottom of the steps. She looked at the stage. She looked at the crowd turning on them. She did the only thing a rat does when the ship explodes. She turned around and started to run toward the exit, but the exit was blocked. The 4 men in suits at the back of the room stepped forward. They pulled badges from their jackets. FBI, nobody moves. The doors swung open wide. Uniformed officers poured in. DEA agents in windbreakers moved through the tables. I looked at Darius. He was shaking. He was weeping. He reached out to grab my arm to beg to plead. Dad, please, he sobbed. Dad, make it stop. I stepped back. I adjusted my cuffs. I looked at him with the cold, detached eye of an engineer condemning a structure. I am not your dad tonight, I said. Tonight I am the demolition expert, and you are the rubble. The agents hit the stage. They spun Darius around. They slammed him against the podium. The sound of handcuffs ratcheting shut echoed through the silent ballroom. I watched them read him his rights. I watched the tears stream down his face mixed with snot and terror. I felt nothing. No sadness, no regret, just the satisfaction of a job well done. I walked to the edge of the stage. I looked down at the crowd. They were staring at me with awe and fear. I realized I was still holding the microphone. I raised it one last time. "The drinks are on me," I said. I dropped the mic. It hit the floor with a thud that sounded like a gavel banging down on a guilty verdict. I walked off the stage, past my weeping son, past the stunned governor, and straight toward the exit. The building had come down. The dust was clearing. And I was the only one walking out of the wreckage. The silence in the Ritz-Carlton ballroom did not last. It was broken by a sound that I will never forget. It was the sound of my son's sanity snapping like a tension cable under too much load. Darius lunged. He didn't walk, he didn't run. He threw himself at me across the stage. His face was a contorted mask of panic and rage, the handsome mask of the veterinarian of the year peeling away to reveal the desperate criminal underneath. "He is sick," he screamed, his voice cracking and amplifying through the sound system, causing the governor in the front row to flinch. "My father is having an episode. He is senile. He does not know what he is saying. Cut the mic. Somebody cut the damn mic." He grabbed for the microphone in my hand. His fingers clawed at my wrist. He was younger than me by 30 years, but he had never worked a day of hard labor in his life. I had spent 40 years hauling rebar and climbing scaffolding. I planted my feet. I locked my shoulder. I didn't strike him. I just became an immovable object. He bounced off me, stumbling back against the podium, breathing hard, his chest heaving under the expensive tuxedo. "Security," he yelled, looking frantically toward the wings of the stage. "Get him off the stage. He is mentally unstable. He is ruining the event." Two large men in blazers started to move from the side, but I raised my hand. I didn't look at them. I looked at the audio-visual booth at the back of the room. I looked for the small red light that told me Harrison, my lawyer, had successfully bribed the technician. The light blinked once. I stepped back from the podium, giving Darius the space he thought he wanted. I adjusted my tie. I smoothed the lapel of the cheap brown suit that Courtney had forced me to wear. "You want them to see the truth, son?" I said, my voice calm and amplified. "Then let them see it." I pressed the button on the remote control in my pocket. The massive LED screen behind us, which had been displaying the logo of the King Veterinary Clinic, flickered. The polite blue background vanished. The room went dark for a second, and then a new image appeared. It was grainy and black and white, stamped with a time code from 3 nights ago. It was footage from inside the clinic pharmacy. The crowd gasped. 500 heads turned upward. On the screen, a man in a white coat was frantically sweeping bottles of medicine into a gym bag. He wasn't logging them. He wasn't checking inventory. He was looting the shelves. He turned toward the camera for a split second. The face was unmistakable. It was Darius. "That is a lie," Darius shrieked, spinning around to look at the screen. "That is a deepfake. My father hired someone to make that. It is AI. It is not real." I pressed the button again. The video cut. The screen went black, but the audio system crackled to life. The speakers around the ballroom, which were designed to play Mozart and speeches, were now broadcasting a conversation recorded in my living room on Tuesday night. The quality was crystal clear. "We make him really lose his mind," a woman's voice said. It was smooth, arrogant, and chilling. "We switch his medications. We hide his things. We tell him he did things he didn't do. In a month, any doctor will certify that he is mentally ill." Courtney, who had been trying to shrink into the shadows near the stairs, froze. Every eye in the room turned to her. The women she had been drinking with earlier, the women she had bragged to about her charity work, looked at her with expressions of pure revulsion. She put a hand over her mouth as if she could physically stop the words that had already been spoken. "And once he is committed," the recording continued, this time with Darius's voice, "we sell the house, we pay off the guys, and we are free." Darius stood center stage, his mouth opening and closing like a fish on a dock. He looked at the governor. The governor was whispering to his security detail, his face grim. He looked at Dr. Aris, the chairman of the board. Dr. Aris was clutching his napkin, looking like he was about to be sick. "Turn it off." Darius begged, his voice a whisper now. "Please, Dad, turn it off." "I am not your dad tonight," I said. "I am the evidence." I pressed the button a third time. This was the one I had warned Harrison about. This was the one that would ensure Darius could never practice medicine again. This was the one that would turn the room into a lynch mob. A photo appeared on the screen. It was high resolution, taken with my phone in the dark kennel. It showed Titan the Great Dane. It showed his ribs protruding through his gray fur. It showed the empty food bowl. It showed the IV bag that was dry. It showed a dog that was being starved to death by the man standing on the stage in a $3,000 tuxedo. The sound that came from the audience wasn't a gasp. It was a growl. It was a low collective rumble of anger. These were people who loved animals. These were people who spent thousands on their pets. They were looking at a monster. Darius covered his face with his hands. No, he moaned. No, no, no. I walked back to the microphone. I stood next to my weeping son. I looked out at the sea of faces. I looked into the lens of the news camera that was broadcasting live to the 11 o'clock news. You called me senile, Darius. I said, my voice hard as granite. You told these people I was confused. You told them I didn't know what I was doing. I turned to him. He lowered his hands. His eyes were red and wet. He looked like a child who had broken a window, but this window couldn't be fixed. I know exactly what I'm doing, I said. You wanted the house, son. You wanted the $3 million asset on the cliff. Well, I have news for you. That house was sold at 9 a.m. this morning to the Legal Defense Fund. The deed is transferred. The locks are changed. You don't own a single brick. Darius swayed. He grabbed the podium to keep from falling. You wanted the fame, I continued, pointing at the cameras. You wanted to be the most talked about veterinarian in the state. Well, congratulations. Look around you. You are famous. Tomorrow morning, everyone in California will know your name. They will know you as the man who steals drugs. They will know you as the man who starves dogs. They will know you as the man who tried to lock his father in an asylum to cover his gambling debts. Courtney let out a scream from the bottom of the stairs. It was a primal sound of a social climber falling off the ladder and hitting every rung on the way down. She tried to run. She turned on her heel, her gold dress shimmering, and sprinted toward the side exit. She didn't make it. The double doors at the back of the ballroom didn't just open. They burst outward. It wasn't the waiters bringing the main course. It wasn't the valet drivers. 6 men in blue windbreakers with yellow lettering marched into the room. They moved with the synchronized precision of a raid team. The letters on their backs read DEA in bold white print. Behind them came 4 officers in suits, FBI, and behind them local uniformed police. The music stopped. The murmurs stopped. The only sound was the heavy tread of law enforcement boots on the plush carpet. Courtney skidded to a halt near the exit. A female agent stepped in front of her, blocking the path. Courtney tried to pivot to turn back, but 2 more agents cut off her retreat. She was trapped in the middle of the dance floor alone under the house lights. Darius looked up. He saw the agents coming down the center aisle. He saw the handcuffs hanging from their belts. He saw the end of his life walking toward him. He looked at me one last time. Dad, he whispered. Help me. I looked at him. I looked at the son who had kicked my dog. I looked at the son who had planned to throw me away like garbage. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small piece of paper. It was the receipt for the certified mail I had sent that morning. I already helped you, I said. I helped you find the consequences you have been running from your whole life. The lead DEA agent climbed the stairs to the stage. He didn't look at me. He looked at Darius. Darius King, he said, his voice flat and professional. I have a federal warrant for your arrest for the distribution of controlled substances, wire fraud, and animal cruelty. Turn around and place your hands behind your back. Darius started to cry. It was a pathetic, ugly sound. He turned around slowly. The agent grabbed his wrists and ratchet-cuffed him. The sound of the metal clicking shut echoed through the silent room like a gunshot. They marched him off the stage. They marched him past the governor, who was looking at him with stone-cold fury. They marched him past Dr. Otis, who was shaking his head in disbelief. As they dragged him past the table where I had been sitting, I saw him look at the empty chair. He was looking for the safety net. He was looking for the father who fixed everything. But the father wasn't there. The engineer was standing on the stage watching the demolition. Across the room, the FBI agents had surrounded Courtney. She was arguing. She was pointing at Darius, screaming that she didn't know anything, that it was all him. But then one of the agents held up a phone. He played a clip. It was her voice from the live stream I had recorded on Tuesday. We managed him. We facilitated the transfer. She stopped screaming. She slumped. They cuffed her hands behind her back. The gold sequins of her dress scratched against the metal. I stood alone on the stage. The screen behind me was still showing the picture of Titan. I leaned into the microphone one last time. I am sorry to interrupt your dinner, I said. My name is Otis King. and I would like to make a toast. I raised my empty hand. To integrity, I said. It is the only thing you cannot buy and the only thing you cannot fake. I walked off the stage. I didn't look back at the screen. I didn't look back at the empty space where my son had stood. I walked down the stairs and the crowd parted for me like the Red Sea. They didn't look at me with pity anymore. They looked at me with fear and respect. I walked toward the exit. Harrison was waiting for me by the door. He was holding my blue jacket, the one I actually liked. "You did it, Otis," he said quietly, handing me the jacket. "You really did it." "Is the transfer complete?" I asked. "Putting the jacket on over the terrible brown suit," confirmed, Harrison said. "The house belongs to the fund. The accounts are frozen. The assets are secured." "Good," I said. "Take me home, Harrison. I have a dog to feed." We walked out into the cool night air. The fog was gone. The stars were out. Behind us the party was over, but for me the night was just beginning. The building had come down. The dust was settling, and I was the only one walking out of the wreckage. The ballroom of the Ritz-Carlton had transformed from a sanctuary of high society into a theater of federal justice. The air conditioning could not combat the sudden heat of panic that radiated from the head table. The DEA agents moved with a terrifying efficiency that contrasted sharply with the slow, leisurely pace of the gala dinner. They did not run. They did not shout. They simply advanced like a rising tide that could not be stopped. I watched from the edge of the stage as the lead agent reached my son. Darius was still gripping the podium, his knuckles white, his face a mask of disbelief. He looked like a captain trying to steer a ship that had already broken in half. "Darius King," the agent said, his voice carrying over the stunned silence of the room. "I am Special Agent Miller with the Drug Enforcement Administration. You are under arrest for the illegal distribution of Schedule III narcotics, wire fraud, and the interstate transport of controlled substances." Darius tried to pull away. It was a reflexive motion, the instinct of a trapped animal. "Do not touch me," he hissed. "Do you know who I am? I am the veterinarian of the year. The governor is sitting right there. Tell them, Governor. Tell them this is a mistake." He looked desperately at the front row. The governor did not stand up. He did not speak. He leaned back in his chair and signaled his security detail to create a wall between himself and the stage. Darius was toxic. He was radioactive. The political elite of California were already rewriting their memories, erasing their association with the man in the midnight blue tuxedo. "Turn around," the agent said, grabbing Darius by the shoulder and spinning him. "No," Darius screamed. "I am a doctor. You cannot do this." The sound of the handcuffs ratcheting shut was loud, crisp, and final. It was the sound of a steel door slamming on a future that would never happen. Darius slumped against the podium, his knees buckling. The arrogance that had fueled him for years evaporated, leaving behind only a frightened child who had played a game he did not understand. But the demolition was not finished. There was still one pillar left standing. I turned my gaze toward the side of the stage. Courtney had frozen near the service exit. She was clutching her gold-sequined purse to her chest as if it contained the oxygen she needed to breathe. She watched her husband being cuffed, and I saw the calculation in her eyes. It was cold and instantaneous. She was doing the math. Darius was a sinking asset. She needed to divest immediately. She took a step backward toward the shadows of the kitchen door. She was going to slip away. She was going to run to the airport, use the money she had stolen from the bonsai trees, and disappear into a new life before the sun came up. I could not let that happen. I stepped down from the stage. My knees did not hurt. My back did not ache. I moved with the speed of a man 20 years younger. I cut across the floor, intercepting her path. "Going somewhere, Courtney?" I asked, my voice low and steady. She flinched. She looked at me with a mixture of hatred and fear. "Get out of my way, old man," she whispered. "This has nothing to do with me. This is Darius. He is the criminal. He is the drug dealer. I just handle the marketing. I did not know anything about the ketamine." She tried to step around me, her gold dress rustling like dry leaves. I stepped to the right, blocking her again. "You did not know about the drugs?" I asked. "Maybe not, but you certainly knew about the money." "I don't know what you are talking about," she spat. "Move, Otis, or I will start screaming. I will tell them you attacked me. Who are they going to believe? The crying woman or the crazy old man?" I reached into the pocket of my cheap brown suit. I pulled out my phone. I didn't need to look at the screen. I knew exactly which file was queued up. "I think they will believe you, Courtney," I said. "Specifically, I think they will believe the version of you that speaks when she thinks no one is listening." I pressed play. I held the phone up. The volume was set to maximum. The recording was from 3 days ago. It was the conversation she had with the bonsai collector in my garden. Wire the rest to the account number I provided. Courtney's voice, tinny but unmistakable, floated through the air. It is an offshore account, correct? My husband does not need to know about this transaction. I want to surprise him with a vacation once the house is sold. Courtney went pale. Her mouth opened but no sound came out. But that wasn't the damning part. I let the recording play on. I need to structure the deposits so they stay under the reporting limit, her voice continued. My consulting firm can invoice the buyer for interior design services. That way it looks like legitimate income. We do it all the time to clean up the cash flow. I stopped the recording. That sounds a lot like money laundering, Courtney, I said. Structuring deposits, falsifying invoices, using a legitimate business to clean dirty money. That is illegal, she whispered, her eyes darting around the room. You recorded me illegally. That is inadmissible. Maybe I said, shrugging. But the men standing behind you might disagree. Courtney spun around. 2 men in gray suits were standing by the kitchen doors. They did not look like the DEA agents. They did not have the aggression or the tactical gear. They looked like accountants who carried guns. They wore glasses. They looked bored. They looked terrifying. Mrs. King, one of the men said, adjusting his spectacles. We are with the Internal Revenue Service Criminal Investigation Division. We have been auditing your consulting firm for 3 months based on a tip we received about irregular cash flows. The tip had come from Harrison, my lawyer, 3 days ago, but Courtney did not need to know that yet. We would like to ask you some questions about your offshore holdings in the Cayman Islands, the agent continued, and about the $50,000 you paid in cash to a known document forger named Paul Hayes. Courtney dropped her purse. It hit the floor with a heavy thud. It wasn't me, she shrieked, her voice cracking into a high-pitched wail. It was Otis. It was the old man. He is the one with the money. He is setting us up. The IRS agent didn't even blink. Mrs. King, we have the bank records. We have the IP addresses. We have the signature cards. Please place your hands behind your back. She fought. It was a pathetic, undignified struggle. She tried to slap the agent. She tried to kick. The gold sequins of her dress tore as they wrestled her arms back. The sound of ripping fabric was loud in the quiet room. When the handcuffs clicked onto her wrists, she let out a sound that wasn't human. It was the sound of a vanity mirror shattering. I stood in the middle of the chaos. To my left, the DEA was dragging my son toward the main exit. To my right, the IRS was marching my daughter-in-law toward the service elevators. The room was a sea of shocked faces and flashing smartphones. Darius saw me. He twisted in the grip of the agents. He planted his feet, trying to stop his forward momentum. He looked wild. His hair was disheveled, his tuxedo jacket torn at the shoulder. Dad, he screamed. The word ripped out of his throat, raw and bloody. Dad, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? I walked toward him. The DEA agents paused, letting me approach. They knew who I was. They knew I was the architect of this takedown. I stopped, 3 feet from my son. I looked him in the eye. I didn't see the little boy I raised. I didn't see the promise of the future. I saw a stranger who had tried to erase me. You are killing me. Dad? Darius sobbed, tears streaming down his face, mixing with the snot running from his nose. You are destroying my life. You are murdering your own son. How can you do this? I am your flesh and blood. You killed me. The accusation hung in the air, heavy and thick. He wanted me to feel guilt. He wanted me to break. He wanted the father to step in and save the child one last time. I felt a phantom pain in my chest, but I pushed it down. I pushed it down into the concrete foundation of my resolve. I didn't kill you, Darius, I said, my voice cold enough to freeze the sweat on his forehead. I took a step closer until I could smell the fear on him. I am a surgeon today, son. And you and your greed and your lies and your cruelty. You are a malignant tumor. Darius flinched as if I had slapped him. I let a tumor grow on this family for 30 years, I continued. I fed it. I protected it. I let it think it was healthy tissue, and it almost killed me. I looked at the handcuffs on his wrists. Tonight, I didn't commit murder, I said. I performed a surgery. I cut out the rot so the rest of the body can survive. Darius stared at me. The realization hit him. There was no mercy coming. There was no checkbook opening to make this go away. The old man he thought was weak was actually the strongest thing in the room. The DEA agent nodded to me, a silent gesture of respect. Let's go, he said to Darius. They hauled him away. He didn't scream anymore. He just hung his head and let them drag him. I turned to watch Courtney. She wasn't screaming either, she was negotiating. I could see her talking fast to the IRS agents, her eyes wild, probably trying to trade information on Darius for a lighter sentence. She was already turning on him. The alliance of greed had dissolved the moment the handcuffs went on. The double doors at the main entrance swung open. The press was waiting. The photographers who had been promised a puff piece about a charity donation were now witnessing the perp walk of the century. Flashbulbs erupted like a lightning storm. "Dr. King, is it true, you poisoned dogs?" a reporter shouted. "Mrs. King, where is the money?" reporters yelled, shoving microphones into Courtney's face as she was led out a side door. I watched them go. My son and his wife, the future of the King family, being led away in chains for the evening news. I stood alone in the center of the ballroom. The guests were silent, staring at me. They didn't know what to do. They didn't know if they should applaud or run. I saw Dr. Darius, the chairman of the board, standing by the stage. He looked pale, shaking. I walked over to him. "I apologize for the disruption, doctor," I said, buttoning my cheap jacket. Darius swallowed hard. "Mr. King, I had no idea. The donation. Is it real?" I reached into my inside pocket. I pulled out the deed to the house. The real deed, not the fake one I had shown Darius. This one was already notarized, already stamped, already transferred to the Legal Defense Fund. "It is real," I said, handing him the document. $3 million. Use it to catch the next one before he hurts anyone else. Darius took the paper with trembling hands. "Thank you, Otis." "Thank you." I nodded. I turned and walked toward the exit. The crowd parted for me. I saw respect in their eyes now, fear too. They saw a man who would burn down his own house to kill the rats inside. I walked out into the cool night air. The valet brought my rusted Ford truck around. It looked out of place among the Bentleys and the Mercedes, but tonight it looked like the most honest thing in the world. I climbed in. I started the engine. It rattled and coughed, but it started. I drove away from the Ritz-Carlton. I didn't look back. The surgery was a success. The patient had survived, but the recovery was going to be long and lonely. I headed north toward the house on the cliff. It was empty now. The furniture was sold. The trees were gone. But it was mine again. And tomorrow I had a dog to adopt and a new life to build. The tumor was gone. It was time to heal. The air inside the Los Angeles County Jail tasted like ammonia and recycled despair. It was Monday morning, 2 days after the gala, and the adrenaline had faded, leaving behind a cold, gray reality. I sat on a metal bench in the waiting area, holding a briefcase on my lap. My hands were steady. My heart was a stone. I was not there to visit a son. I was there to inspect the wreckage. A man in a suit that cost less than his shoes approached me. He was sweating despite the chill in the room. This was Mr. Sterling Darius, criminal defense attorney. He looked like a man trying to stop a tidal wave with a bucket. "Mr. King," he said, his voice dripping with forced sympathy. "Thank you for coming. I know this is difficult, but we have a bail hearing in an hour. The judge is going to set it high. $1 million, maybe 2, because of the flight risk and the federal charges." I looked at him. I did not blink. "So you want money? We want your help." "Mr. King," the lawyer said, leaning in, "Darius is your son. He is your flesh and blood. He made mistakes, yes, but he was under influence. He was pressured. He does not belong in general population. If he stays in here awaiting trial, they will eat him alive. We need you to post the bond. You have the assets. We know about the house sale. We know about the trust." I stood up. I towered over the little lawyer. "I am not here to pay you," I said. "I am here to say goodbye. Take me to him." The lawyer hesitated. He looked like he wanted to argue, but he saw something in my eyes that made him swallow his words. He nodded and led me through the security checkpoint. The visitation room was a long corridor divided by thick, reinforced glass. On one side were the free. On the other side were the damned. I sat down at booth number 4. I waited. The door on the other side buzzed open. A guard led a man in, handcuffed and shackled at the ankles. It took me a moment to recognize him. Darius had aged 10 years in 48 hours. His midnight blue tuxedo was gone, replaced by a bright orange jumpsuit that hung off his frame. His hair was matted. His face was swollen and bruised. He had a split lip. Apparently, the general population had already introduced themselves. He sat down. He picked up the black phone receiver. His hands were shaking so violently he almost dropped it. I picked up my receiver. I did not say a word.
I just watched him. Dad.
The word came out as a sob.
Dad, get me out of here, please. You have to get me out. They hurt me, Dad. They took my shoes. I cannot sleep. It is cold. I listened to him cry. I listened to the same voice that had ordered a shipment of ketamine to sell to dealers. I listened to the same voice that had laughed about locking me in a shed. I did not feel pity. I felt the cold precision of a structural engineer assessing a failed load. The beam had snapped. The integrity was gone. "It is a bad place, Darius," I said calmly. "It is a cage, just like the one you put Titan in." Darius flinched. He wiped his nose on his sleeve. "That wasn't me," he pleaded, leaning forward until his forehead touched the glass. "It was Courtney. It was all Courtney. She made me do it, Dad. She needed the money. She told me to cut the food. She told me to sell the drugs. I didn't want to. I tried to stop her. I watched him spin the lie. It was a desperate, reflexive attempt to shift the load. He was still trying to manipulate me. He still thought I was the safety net." "You are lying," I said. My voice was flat. "I heard you, Darius. I heard you on the phone. I heard you telling the dealer you needed time to cook the books. I heard you threatening to sell my house. Courtney is greedy, yes. But you are the one with the medical license. You are the one who took the oath." "But she pushed me," Darius cried. "She said she would leave me if I didn't give her the lifestyle. I did it for love, Dad. I did it for family. Family," I repeated. "You tried to declare me insane. You tried to throw me in a state facility. Is that love?" "I was scared," he whispered. "I was scared of the guys I owed money to. They said they would kill me. So you decided to kill me instead," I said. "You decided to erase my life to save yours. That is not fear, son. That is cowardice." I opened my briefcase. I pulled out a single sheet of paper. It was heavy, cream-colored stock. It looked official. Darius' eyes widened. He saw the paper, and hope flared in his chest like a match in a dark room. "Is that the bail check?" he asked, his voice trembling with relief. "Is that the bond?" "Oh, thank God. Thank God, Dad. I knew you wouldn't leave me here. I promise I will pay you back. I will work. I will fix this." I pressed the paper against the glass. It was not a check. It was a legal document titled Notice of Disinheritance and Severance of Familial Ties. It was a document Harrison had drafted for me on Sunday morning. It formally removed Darius from my will. It revoked any and all power of attorney. It legally barred him from contacting me or coming within 500 feet of my property. It was a divorce decree between a father and a son. Darius read the title. His mouth fell open. The hope died in his eyes, replaced by a horror that was absolute. "What is this?" he whispered. I leaned into the phone. "Your mother Etta used to say something," I told him. "She said it when you were little and you would cheat at board games. She said it when you lied about your homework. She said, talent without virtue is waste." I paused, letting the memory sink in. "I have raised a waste for 38 years, Darius," I said. "I watered a weed thinking it was a flower. But I am done gardening. Today is the day I retire from the position of father." Darius started to scream. He slammed his fist against the glass. "No, you can't do this. You are my dad. You have to help me." I stood up. I looked down at him. He was small. He was broken. And he was exactly where he belonged. "I already helped you," I said. "I stopped you from hurting anyone else. That is the greatest gift I could give the world." I hung up the phone. Darius was still screaming, mouthing words I couldn't hear. He was begging. He was cursing. He was looking at me with the eyes of a stranger. I turned my back on him. I walked out of the visitation room. I walked past the lawyer who was waiting expectantly in the hallway. "Did he sign?" The lawyer asked, holding out his hand. "He signed his confession," I said, walking past him. "Good luck with the hearing. You are going to need it." I did not stay for the bail hearing, but Harrison was there. He called me an hour later while I was sitting in a diner eating a slice of lemon pie. "It is done," Otis Harrison said. "The judge denied bail." "Denied completely?" I asked. "Taking a forkful of pie." "Completely," Harrison said. "The federal prosecutor played the tapes, Otis. He played the recording of Darius talking about the drug shipment. He played the video of the starving dog.
The judge said Darius was a danger to the community and a flight risk. He is remanded to custody until trial. Good, I said. And Courtney. That is the interesting part, Harrison said, his voice brightening. The IRS and the FBI put them in separate interrogation rooms. The prisoner's dilemma, Otis. It works every time. Tell me. Courtney cracked in 20 minutes, Harrison said. She realized Darius was going down and she decided she wasn't going to go down with him. She gave them everything. She gave them the location of the offshore accounts. She gave them the names of the loan sharks. She even told them about a hit-and-run Darius was involved in 3 years ago that he covered up. I stopped eating. A hit-and-run? I didn't know about that. She is singing like a canary. Harrison continued. She is trying to cut a deal for immunity. She claims Darius forced her into the scheme. She claims she was a battered wife terrified of her husband. She is lying, I said. Of course she is, Harrison agreed. But the feds don't care. They just want the convictions. But here is the kicker. When they told Darius that Courtney had flipped, he lost it. He started confessing to crimes they didn't even know about just to implicate her. He told them about her money laundering scheme. He told them about how she defrauded her consulting clients. He gave them the passwords to her encrypted laptop. I leaned back in the booth. They were eating each other. The sharks were in a feeding frenzy, and they were tearing chunks out of their own flesh. They deserve each other, I said. They are going away for a long time, Otis Harrison said. Federal sentencing guidelines for the drug trafficking alone are 10 to 20 years. With the fraud, the animal cruelty, and the conspiracy, they are looking at 30 years minimum. Each. 30 years. Darius would be 68 when he got out, my age. He would spend the prime of his life in a concrete box thinking about the $3 million he almost had. Thank you, Harrison, I said. Send me the bill. No bill, Otis Harrison said. The legal defense fund covers my fees. You set it up that way, remember? I smiled. I had forgotten. I was using their stolen inheritance to pay for the lawyer who put them in prison. It was a poetic symmetry that Etta would have appreciated. I hung up the phone. I finished my pie. It was tart and sweet. I walked out of the diner. The sun was shining. The air was clear. I felt lighter than I had in years. The weight of my son, the weight of his failures, the weight of his greed was gone. I got into my truck. I had one more stop to make. I drove to the animal shelter, the county facility where they had taken the animals from Darius's clinic. I walked into the reception area. The smell of bleach and dog food hit me, but this time it didn't smell like misery. It smelled like hope. I am here for Titan, I told the woman at the desk. She looked up, her eyes widening. You are the man from the news, the one who exposed the clinic. I am just a guy looking for a dog, I said. She smiled. He is in the back. He is doing better. He ate a full bowl of food this morning. She led me to the kennels. Titan was in a large run with a soft blanket. He was still skinny, still weak, but his head was up. His ears perked when he saw me. He recognized me. He recognized the man who had fed him in the dark. I opened the gate. I knelt down. Titan wobbled over to me and licked my face. Hello, boy, I whispered, burying my face in his neck. We made it. We survived the storm. I adopted him right there. I paid the fees. I bought a new collar, a red one. I walked him out to the truck. I lifted him onto the seat because he was too weak to jump. We drove north along the coast. The ocean was blue and endless on my left. I was going home, not to the house of lies and tension, but to a house that was clean, a house that had been purged by fire and truth. Darius was in a cell. Courtney was in an interrogation room. But I was free. And for the first time in a long time, I was proud of the name Otis King. I had built bridges my whole life. But sometimes the most important engineering feat is knowing when to blow the bridge up to stop the enemy from crossing. I looked at Titan sleeping on the seat beside me. We are going to be okay, I said to him. We are going to be just fine. The Pacific Ocean has a way of washing things clean if you give it enough time. It had been 6 months since the night at the Ritz-Carlton. 6 months since the flashbulbs blinded my son. 6 months since I walked out of that ballroom and left the wreckage of my family behind me. I sat on the wide teak bench on my back deck. The wood was warm against my legs, heated by the midday Malibu sun. This was a new bench. I had built it myself last month, sanding the wood until it was as smooth as glass and sealing it against the salt air. The old furniture, the stuff Courtney had bought to stage the house for sale, was gone. I had donated it all to a shelter. I didn't want anything in my house that had been touched by her greed. "Go long, boy," I shouted. My voice was strong. It didn't have the rasp of the fake senility anymore. It was the voice of a man who ruled his own domain. I pulled back my arm and threw the bright yellow tennis ball as hard as I could. It soared in a high arc over the green lawn, hanging for a second against the blue sky before dropping toward the edge of the property. A black thunderbolt shot across the grass. Titan was not the skeleton I had found in the cage 6 months ago. He was 160 pounds of muscle and joy. His coat was shiny and sleek like polished obsidian. His ribs were covered by powerful muscle. He moved with the grace of a predator and the happiness of a puppy. He caught the ball on the first bounce, his massive jaws snapping shut with a satisfying thud. He skidded to a halt, kicking up a spray of dirt, and turned back to me, his tail wagging so hard his whole body shook. He trotted back to the deck and dropped the slimy ball at my feet. He looked up at me with brown eyes that held nothing but absolute trust. "Good boy," I said, reaching down to scratch him behind the ears. "You are a good boy, Titan." I looked at him and I saw my victory. Every pound he gained was a testament to the fact that I had won. Every time he ran without pain was a reminder that Darius was no longer hurting anyone. I picked up the mug of tea from the side table. It was Earl Grey, hot and strong, just the way Etta used to make it. I took a sip and looked out at the horizon. Technically, I didn't own this view anymore, not on paper. Harrison Cole, my lawyer and friend, had pulled off a legal maneuver that they were still studying in law school. When I donated the house to the Legal Defense Fund against veterinary fraud, I included a stipulation in the deed. It was a standard retained life estate. It meant that while the charity owned the asset, I retained the exclusive right to live in the property until the day I died, and the rent. I looked at the frame hanging on the wall inside the living room. Inside the glass was a single crisp $1 bill. That was my rent for the year. $1. Harrison had handed me the lease agreement with a grin so wide it almost split his face. "You pay $1 a year, Otis," he had said, "and in exchange the fund covers the property taxes, the insurance, and the maintenance. You basically live in a $3 million mansion for free while your donation funds the prosecution of bad vets across the country. It is the best deal I have ever written. It was a good deal. But the best part wasn't the money. The best part was knowing that every time Darius thought about this house in his prison cell, he knew that it was now funding the very people who had put him there. The phone sitting on the bench next to me started to vibrate. It wasn't a text, it wasn't an email, it was a call. I looked at the screen. The caller ID read unknown number, but below it in smaller letters it said Federal Correctional Institution Lompoc. It was Darius. This wasn't the first time he had called. In the first month after his sentencing, he had called every day. At first the voicemails were angry. He screamed about how I had tricked him. He screamed about how unfair it was. He blamed me for his ruined life. Then the calls changed. They became begging. He cried, he pleaded, he asked for money for the commissary, he asked for a better lawyer, he asked me to visit him. I never answered, not once. I watched the phone vibrate. It danced across the wood of the bench, buzzing like an angry insect. I could picture him. I could see him standing in the line for the phone in his beige jumpsuit, holding the receiver with hands that used to perform surgeries. He was probably thinner now. Prison food wasn't like the catered meals Courtney used to buy. He was probably scared. He was probably telling anyone who would listen that he was innocent, that his father was crazy, that he was the victim. Titan sensed the change in my mood. He stopped wagging his tail. He let out a low growl deep in his throat, looking at the phone as if it were a threat. "It is okay, boy," I said softly. "It is just a ghost." I reached out and picked up the phone. The vibration tickled my palm. I had a choice. I could answer. I could listen to his voice. I could hear him apologize or curse or beg. I could tell him that I forgave him. I could tell him that I missed him. I could try to salvage some scrap of a relationship from the ashes. But then I remembered the ledger. I remembered the fake medical records. I remembered the shed he was going to lock me in. I remembered the look on his face when he kicked the dog. That man wasn't my son. That man was a stranger who shared my DNA. And I didn't owe strangers anything. I didn't slide the green button to answer. I didn't slide the red button to decline. I pressed the small icon in the corner. Block caller. The phone stopped vibrating. The screen went dark. Silence returned to the deck. The only sounds were the crashing of the waves below and the heavy breathing of the dog. I put the phone back down. Some people might think that was cold. Some people might say that a father should never turn his back on his child no matter what. They might say that blood is thicker than water, but those people have never had their blood poisoned. Those people have never had to look at their child and realize that the person they love is a predator. I had spent 40 years building a family. I had poured my heart and soul into that foundation. But when I inspected it, I found cracks that couldn't be repaired. I found rot that went all the way to the core. An engineer knows that you can't save a building that is structurally unsound. If you try, it will just collapse on top of you. You have to condemn it. You have to bring it down. And then you have to clear the rubble and start over. I wasn't lonely. I had Titan. I had Harrison, who came over for poker on Tuesdays. I had the letters from the people the fund had helped. Just yesterday, I received a letter from a woman whose cat had been saved because the fund shut down a fraudulent clinic in San Diego. She sent me a picture of the cat. It was sitting in a sunbeam looking happy. That was my legacy now. Not a son who carried my name, but the lives I was protecting with my actions. I stood up. My knees popped, but they held strong. "Come on, Titan," I said, picking up the ball again. One more throw. I hurled the ball toward the horizon. It disappeared into the bright light of the afternoon sun. Titan chased after it, a blur of joy and muscle, running free in the garden of the house that truth built. I walked to the railing and looked down at the Pacific. The water was vast and deep and indifferent. It didn't care about my money. It didn't care about my name. It just kept moving. I took a deep breath of the salt air. It filled my lungs, cleaning out the last of the stale air from the past. I smiled. Soulness has a price, yes. You eat dinner alone. The house is quiet at night. You don't have anyone to carry your name forward. But peace. Peace is priceless. The peace of knowing you are safe in your own home. The peace of knowing you are not being lied to. The peace of knowing that the creatures under your care are fed and loved. I looked at the spot where the bonsai trees used to be. I had planted new things there, native succulents, wildflowers, things that were hardy, things that could survive a drought, things that didn't need to be shaped by wire and force. They were growing wild and beautiful. I thought about the lesson I had learned, the lesson I would tell anyone who would listen. Sometimes you spend your whole life planting a tree. You water it, you feed it, you protect it from the storm. You hope it will give you shade when you are old. But sometimes that tree grows poisonous. Sometimes the roots start to tear up your foundation. Sometimes the branches block out the sun, and when that happens, you have to make a choice. You can let the tree destroy your house, or you can cut it down. You have to be willing to burn the wood. You have to be willing to stand in the smoke and watch it turn to ash, because only after the fire is out can you see the sky again. Titan came bounding back, the ball in his mouth. He dropped it at my feet and barked a happy, demanding sound. I picked up the ball. "I am ready, boy," I said. "I am ready for whatever comes next." I threw the ball. I watched it fly. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't looking back. I was looking forward. The bridge was gone, but I was on the right side of the river. And the view from here was spectacular. We are often told that family is sacred, an unbreakable bond that defines us. But I learned the hard way that blood is not a binding contract for abuse. True family is built on mutual respect, not biological obligation. For years, I was the architect of my own misery, enabling a son who viewed my love as a weakness to exploit. It took losing everything I thought I wanted to find everything I actually needed. The most important structure you will ever build is your own self-respect. Defend it fiercely, even if it means standing alone in the wreckage. If you have ever had to make the difficult choice to cut ties with a toxic family member to save your own peace, let me know your story in the comments below, and please like and subscribe for more stories of justice served.